Chapter 3, 1001. The Apocalypse. The world had moved on, and it was still in motion. The world was rolling down a steep slope. It moved slowly at first, but as the wheels of history gained momentum, things changed. Time seemed to flow faster and faster, endlessly accelerating. By now, it felt like the world was barreling forward at a frightening speed, impossible to slow down and out of control. Not even those who ruled it could stop the inevitable. All they could do was try to steer the world in the least damaging direction, hoping that something would change before it reached the end of the road, before it fell into the bottomless abyss that waited at the end of the slope. Change and hope. In the face of apocalypse, the two became synonymous, shining a light upon the dark expanse of the ominous future. A year had passed since the Dreamspawn plague had been purged from the world. 57 years had come and gone since the nightmare spell descended upon the world, and the end was closer than ever before. The dream realm was said to have begun consuming Earth, and even if people could not observe the destruction of their world yet, they could already feel the consequences. Beyond that, humanity was recovering from a devastating loss. Years of memories were gone, plunging countless people into confusion and uncertainty. The shock of this collective amnesia was hard to describe with words, let alone cope with. Needless to say, myriad problems and conflicts had emerged as a result. For example, on a bright day soon after the disaster, a woman named Beth had glanced at a stack of papers handed to her with a dazed expression. Her hair gathered in a messy bun, her eyes bloodshot from the lack of sleep. She rubbed her face. "So, you're telling me that I successfully reinvented electricity? Built a hydroelectric power station in the dream realm? Lit the entire bastion? Yes, you should recognize your own handwriting, no? These are your own notes documenting the entire process." Beth glanced at the gallant man who had handed her the papers, the infamously dreamy Master Quentin. "Right, and you are also claiming that we are lovers now." He nodded silently, then smiled. Beth sighed deeply and glanced away to hide her blushing cheeks. "Damn. No, but go me, I guess." Or, in a different part of the dream world, awakened Yutra was nursing a toddler while his wife was staring at them with glistening eyes. "He's ours. Our son," Yutra chuckled. "Naturally. Whose else would he be? Just look at that nose. That's your nose?" He shook his head. "Life sure is funny, though. I remember having this exact conversation, only it was you insisting that the cute rascal was mine." Conversations like that had happened all over the world. Of course, not all of them were happy. In fact, most of them weren't. Humanity had endured a lot in the years that were gone now, after all. The conquest of new territories in the Dream Realm, the war campaign against the Skinwalker, the partial loss of the Eastern Quadrant, the rise of the King of Nothing, and the war between him and the human domain. There were countless gates that had opened in the waking world as well, bringing an ocean of nightmare creatures with them. Many lives had been lost, trying to contain the swelling tide of abominations, and people had to mourn these losses all over again. But no matter how deep the wounds of those who had forgotten were, those few who remembered were equally scarred. Sation, Morgan, Kai, Effie, and the rest of them, they still remembered what the Dreamspawn had done to them, as well as what he had made them do. And even if the cruelties that had been perpetrated or endured by them were the result of mental manipulation, the memories of experiencing that nightmare were real. But the world was moving on. The world was in motion, and the pressure of the present left humanity no time to wallow in the forgotten past, especially because of what awaited them in the future. The official explanation for the calamity that befell humanity was that a nightmare creature of a high rank had infected the world with a mental hex, and that the memories of mankind had to be cleansed in order to destroy that hex. The sun still rose every morning, and the immortal flame still burned. Changing Star was still ruling humanity from her radiant throne, and if she said that the nightmare creature had been dealt with, that they had to continue living, then that was what they had to do. It was not like people had another choice. An official Memorial Day was established to honor the forgotten, those whose lives had been swallowed by oblivion. The first Remembrance Day was celebrated in a solemn atmosphere on the first anniversary of the calamity, giving those who had lost something a bitter kind of closure, while those who had gained something precious were reminded to appreciate what they had. The world had been changed by the disaster, and it was changing still. The changes were staggering. The Dream Realm was in the throes of a global crisis. The war between the human domain and the King of Nothing which had apparently taken place during the Forgotten Years, had rewritten the geography of both the East and the West. In the East, the devastation of the Black Mountains and the resulting floods had disturbed the nightmare creatures populating the surrounding regions. In the West, the River of Tears had changed course, completely reshaping the balance that had existed for thousands of years in its basin. New horrors were emerging from the lands that had been hidden in the dark depths of the great river once, while the old ones were forced to abandon their territories to seek new hunting grounds. As a result, the abominations everywhere were migrating, flowing toward the citadel cities. The battles to protect them had become both fiercer and more frequent. While traveling between citadels was more hazardous now, humanity had been at war to expand its territories and prepare for the arrival of the settlers from the waking world. But now it was at war to keep its lands. The subjugation campaigns had been suspended during the clash between the human domain and the King of Nothing, and now they were simply over. The soldiers were desperately needed all across the Dream Realm simply to hold on to the human-controlled regions. The waking world wasn't faring any better either. In fact, it felt like it was swiftly approaching the moment of complete collapse. All across the 3 remaining quadrants, the frequency and the category of the emerging gates were increasing. Hordes of nightmare creatures poured into the desolate wastelands of Earth and congregated toward its megacities, threatening to overwhelm their defenders. Nightmare gates were opening within the cities as well, doubling the difficulty of keeping the population safe. But perhaps even worse than the tide of abominations was the damage those gates were dealing to the technological infrastructure of humanity. Even if the nightmare creatures who had emerged from the gate were eliminated and the gate itself sealed behind a containment dome, the interference of the call still persisted, disrupting all the technical systems in a wide area around it. And with the number of active gates constantly increasing, the areas of disruption constantly grew, overlapping with each other and taking entire swathes of city infrastructure out of commission. Humanity was resisting that harmful process, of course. The gates negatively affecting the most vital hubs were prioritized when sending Awakened to challenge nightmares. And breakthroughs achieved by the scientists working on adapting human technology to the Dream Realm were swiftly reverse-engineered to improve the situation on Earth as well. But it was not enough. The progress was woefully insufficient to contend against the spreading nightmare, and so the waking world was slowly sliding into a state of emergency. The billions of people still populating it were anxious and suffering under immense pressure, of course. Nobody knew if there would be a place for them in the Dream Realm, since sustaining such an enormous population there was beyond the capability of the human domain at the moment. A tense mood suffused the struggling cities of Earth, but there were positive changes that had happened during and since the Forgotten Years as well. There were more awakened, ascended, and saints among humans now than ever before, and more still were emerging every month, as if all of humanity was rallied by the approaching end. There was a new supreme to guard it as well, Song of the Fallen, the trusted aide of Lady Changing Star, and was rumored to have attained supremacy during the Forgotten Years. She did not build herself a throne and preferred to stay away from the public eye, but people still felt safer knowing that 2 sovereigns were now watching over them, and that these 2 sovereigns were companions who shared trust and friendship, as opposed to envy and hostility like the previous ones had. That wasn't all either. In fact, there was a 3rd supreme allied with the human domain, and the identity of that supreme was the most wondrous one of all. It was a woman known as Ananka, who was a native of the Dream Realm. She wasn't alone either, ruling over a small nation of people who descended from the survivors of ancient calamities. These strangers, who called themselves the River People, had established an alliance with Changing Star and joined humanity in the task of preparing for the apocalypse. While their number wasn't significant enough to move the scales of history, the foreign knowledge and skills they had brought were a priceless boon. With their help, the initiative to build floating cities in the Storm Sea, which had stagnated for a while, was finally moving along and progressing at incredible speed at that. That alone relieved a great amount of pressure on humanity, which was desperate to bring as many settlers to the Dream Realm as possible. It was not an exaggeration to say that the population capacity of human territories in the dire New World was going to increase by a 3rd in the span of a few short years because of the transformation happening to the citadels of the Storm Sea, all thanks to Ananke of Weave and the River People. But even more importantly than that, the world had been shaken to the core when the rulers of the human domain bestowed the knowledge of natural awakening on their people. It was too incredible to believe, and yet it was true. The River People were a living testament that the natural awakening was possible. And as it turned out, Changing Star and Song of the Fallen had been developing a set of techniques to allow all people to attempt becoming awakened for a long while. Now, these techniques had finally been perfected and made public, freely available to everyone who wanted to gain power, as opposed to being fervently guarded by those who already possessed it. The natural awakening was less assured than conquering a nightmare, but it was much safer as well. And even if it was a slow and uncertain process, it gave everyone, not only those chosen by the nightmare spell, a chance to become stronger. All people now had a chance to awaken without risking their lives in the first nightmare, and even if they ultimately failed, the process itself was beneficial to their bodies and souls. Awakened could attempt to become masters without sacrificing countless lives to the second nightmare as well. This news shook the very foundation of everything humans thought they knew. It gave people a sense that they, too, could survive the apocalypse. But those who already possessed great power knew that everything they had done was not enough to stop the world from falling into the abyss, because all their accomplishments and all their strength were insignificant in the face of the approaching calamity. So they felt far more urgency to grow stronger than those who possessed no strength at all. Nothing ever changes, Sonny sighed. He had desperately chased strength as a young man, but now that he was older and already a demigod, he was still desperately trying to become stronger. Life was far more pleasant now, at least. Chapter 3, 3002, The Incredible Adventures and Astonishing Deeds of Heroic Dreamer. Sunless the Cold Duke of the North, Volume 11, abridged. Life is far more pleasant now, at least. Sonny sighed again. There was a long moment of silence, and then a voice that lacked amusement responded from the darkness. That's great. I am happy for you. I really am. But can you get out of my room? Sonny grimaced and glanced around with a dubious expression. It's not like he wanted to be here either. I mean, I can. But I won't. I'm afraid of Aiko, you see. So even if hiding in this pigsty pains me, I must insist that I stay. He was, naturally, in the depths of the dark castle, suffering the sorry sight of Revel's messy room. Sonny was graciously tolerating the ignoble state of her personal quarters. And yet, his ungrateful minion, that is to say, the venerable, transcendent elder of his clan, did not appreciate his selfless sacrifice one bit. Instead, she had the audacity to be unhappy about it. Sonny was sitting on a chair he had manifested out of shadows, wisely choosing not to trust the surfaces around him. Revel, meanwhile, was glaring at him in displeasure from a lavish bed, where she had been lazing about prior to his arrival. The proud and demonic image of the fearsome light slayer was gone, replaced by a ragged black sweatshirt and a messy bun. The marvelous mimic was back in the Dark City, and the Shadow Clan was busier than ever, not only because most of its members had kept their memories of the plague, which made them indispensable in dealing with its consequences, but also because the Forgotten Shore was at war. The eerie barrows in the north had opened, and a seemingly endless tide of the barrow wraiths was flowing south, threatening to consume his lightless realm. The ancient revenants were both immensely powerful and peculiarly elusive, so the Shadow Legion had been engaged in a ferocious defensive campaign in the last year. The clash between the primeval abominations and the shadows was especially troubling because of the terrifying powers that the shamans of the undead tribes wielded. And then there were the terrifying chieftains as well, and the unseen being who ruled them all too. Among the powers wielded by the Boro Wraith was the eerie ability to steal the souls of their fallen warriors back, preventing the Shadow Legion from swelling with a torrent of new shades during the campaign. In short, the Dark Lord of the Forgotten Shore was quite busy. My top lieutenant is supposed to be busier, though. Why is she even loitering here instead of doing something productive? The gal. If anything, I should be the one telling her to get out of the room. Sonny scoffed and gave Revel a look of reproach. She let out a heavy sigh, hugged a pillow, and leaned back. What is even going on between you and Aiko? She has been looking at you funny as of late. Sonny coughed. Well, how do I put it? She might have remembered that I cost her a job, then hired her to be my assistant, then disappeared for a few years, leaving her to salvage a crumbling business in the absence of the main supplier. Then appeared out of nowhere, bought the business back from her, made her my assistant again, forced her to work as a waitress for about a year. Well, and so on. Revel grimaced as if experiencing a headache. Slow down. I didn't catch half of that. So you and Aiko go way back. Sonny nodded. Oh, yes. In fact, it was I who caught and blackmailed her found and convinced her to join Neff's faction in the Bright Castle. Revel tilted her head a little. The Bright Castle? Since when were you... Wait, no. Actually, never. But it was already too late. FreeWebNovel.com. Sonny grinned. Do you want the long version or the short version? Revel groaned quietly. Well, I'm guessing that I am not getting you to leave before hearing at least one of those? Sonny smiled. Wow, you are so insightful. I really have the best eye for talent, don't I? She gave him a dark look. What the hell? I'm bored. Let's hear the long version. Sonny's smile widened. Listen well, then. A long time ago, a boy was born in the outskirts of NQST. The moment he was born, a vast shadow obscured the sun, and darkness swallowed the world, heralding... Revel waved a hand in the air. Not that long. Get to the point, please. Sonny gave her a sullen, remained silent for a few seconds, then shrugged. Well, anyway. Eventually, the boy entered the first nightmare, picked some berries, and received the blessing of Shadow God. As a result, Revel frowned. Wait. How does picking berries lead to receiving a divine blessing? Sonny blinked a couple of times. Why, because the boy murdered 3 people, and an awakened tyrant thanks to those berries. You might not know it, but people from the outskirts and fresh fruit make for a perilous combination. Revel stared at him silently for a moment. Never mind. Sonny grinned. The boy also received a divine aspect and a crippling flaw. Then he returned to the waking world and met a radiant princess of a fallen clan. Revel rolled her eyes. Actually, I changed my mind. Let's go with the short version. Sonny fell silent and glanced at her with a hurt expression. Eventually, though, he acquiesced. Fine. Well, you know how these stories go. Boy meets girl. Boy falls in love with the girl. Boy becomes magically enslaved by the girl. Gets left behind when she sacrifices herself to save his life. Vows to become stronger than her. Finds her after years of separation. Gets into a huge fight with her. Storms out to a different continent to join a suicidal war. Revel's expression turned progressively more incredulous. Sonny did not mind, though. Boy gets reunited with the girl in the third nightmare. Breaks the fate of all existence with the help of a devious blind oracle to free himself of her. Gets forgotten by the entire world as a result. Loses his mind and wanders the dream realm for a few years, slaughtering all kinds of nightmare creatures. Regains his senses and meets the girl again. Signs a contract to be the fake lover of the girl. Conspires with her to conquer the world. Kills himself. Kills the sovereigns. Pretends to be killed by her. Kills a mad bird to become her magical slave again. Gets robbed blind by the dead bird. Sonny sighed. You know, the usual. Revel exhaled slowly and rubbed her temple. Okay. I'll need to hear a longer version after all. But not too long. How about a medium version? A between version? Can you do that? Sonny beamed. Why, naturally, so. Where was I? He scratched his chin with a thoughtful expression and then said, Anyway, Nephis and I got to know each other on the Forgotten Shore. At first she thought that I was an assassin sent by the great clans to kill her, while I thought that she was a mad demagogue planning a mass slaughter. Revel nodded. Oh, enemies to lovers. Great stuff. Sonny glanced at her in confusion before continuing. But despite that, the two of us quite liked each other. It was just that Cassie had received a prophetic vision, showing that the two of us were destined to fight each other to the death. So, the knowledge of what the future held stood between us. Revel was staring at him intently now. No. Star-crossed lovers. Even better. Sonny frowned. So, anyway, as I was saying, Nephis was playing the role of an enlightened savior, and everyone was dancing to her tune. Except for me. I was the only one who told it to her like it was, and as a result. But Revel interrupted him. Wait. She studied him with a look of concentration, then mumbled. Why does it make sense, though? Changing star as a reserved young woman suppressing her feelings. Then you appear and blow up her whole stoic routine with your nonsense. The roles are reversed, but aren't you a picture-perfect manic pixie dream boy then? I like it. Sonny stared at her with a baffled expression. A manic pixie? A what? What the hell are you talking about? Revel shook her head. Don't think about it. You can continue. Then she raised an eyebrow. Wait, but what about Heimly Castor? In the Song of Light and Darkness, the two of them were clearly... Sonny scoffed. What? Do you believe everything you see on the screen? That guy was the real assassin sent by the great clans to kill her. Actually, shouldn't you know, Lady Song? Revel's eyes suddenly glinted in the darkness. Oh, so it was a doomed love triangle. Sonny almost fell out of his chair out of pure outrage. What? No. There weren't any triangles, okay? None. Revel gave him a doubtful look. Sure. Sonny gritted his teeth. I told you there weren't, didn't I? She glanced at him with a deadpan expression. And I told you sure, didn't I? He glared at her for a short while, then scoffed and glanced away. Well, anyway. The Forgotten Shore was a bit tough on us sleepers. By the end of it all, I'd killed around 400 awakened abominations. And a few fallen ones as well. And a great devil. All of that despite being a mere dormant beast. I also lived in the Dark City alone for a while. Alone with my friends, I mean. A shadow, a talking rock, and a mute statue. Ah, those were great times. I only kept my sanity because of them. Revel's expression turned peculiar for some reason. Ignoring that, Sonny continued his story, eventually reaching the siege of the Crimson Spire and the fateful duel at its pinnacle. But actually, Nephis pretended to lose. All of it was a ploy to get me to leave. She wanted to sacrifice herself to save me. He heard a peculiar sound and glanced at Revel with wide eyes. "Hey, did you just squeal?" She glanced at him chillingly and said in a somber tone. "I did not." Sonny hesitated. "But I clearly heard. You were mistaken. Are you sure? I'm a Supreme after all, so my hearing is pretty great." "Oh, is it? How come you didn't hear me telling you to get the hell out of my room then?" "I did hear. I heard it perfectly well. I just chose to ignore it. I wonder where Aiko is. Maybe I should invite her here to help me check your hearing." Anyway, back to the story. Sonny continued to recount various events from his life. By then, Revel produced a bottle of spirit wine and 2 crystal glasses, as well as some earth snacks and strips of dried monster meat. The head of the Shadow Clan and its field commander got pretty serious about playing hooky after that. I took a bad tumble and spent a few weeks falling into a bottomless abyss of endless darkness. Then the darkness spoke to me. And do you know what it said? It said, "Why is it so dark?" I kid not. Those were its first words. And then, he cut my head clean off. Being beheaded is not fun, let me tell you. But anyway, I put my head back on and killed him. No, wait, it was the other way around. I killed him first and put my head back on after that. So there I was, thinking that we were both going to die, looking into her eyes while she glanced into mine. Time seemed to slow down. And then, she took a deep breath, gathered her courage, and finally admitted it. "It was me who broke your projector," she said. "The projector? The projector? Can you believe that, woman? You know, nothing is more romantic than spending a month drifting together on the corpse of a great monster." Revel's reactions, meanwhile, were quite monotone. "Wait, you are mongrel? Wait, you are the devil of Antarctica? Wait, that is where you draw the line, really? Honey?" Sonny frowned. What was she on about? Naturally, only a complete lunatic would like honey. He was not the most sane person, but eating insect vomit was too much, even for him. Rich people. Eventually, Sonny got to the end of the tale. And that was how everyone remembered me. So, here you go. That is why I am hiding from Aiko. Revel stared at him with a complicated expression. That's peculiar. Sonny raised an eyebrow. What? Revel shook her head. If everyone remembers you now, how come I don't? He blinked a few times. Isn't that obvious? It's because we've never met before. I became the Lord of Shadows. He paused for a moment and then offered helpfully. Because you are an antisocial shut-in who never goes out. Revel glared at him. Is it? Or is it because you were too unremarkable and insignificant to meet me? Sonny scoffed. I met Seishan, didn't I? And Morgan. And Mordred, too. Knave from the House of Night. Actually, I met Beastmaster as well. She called me little brother. So, it's just you. Way to go, Recluse. Revel nodded. I see. Then Song of the Fallen must have made a mess out of your head at some point. Do you expect me to believe all that nonsense? Sonny opened his mouth to retort. But at that moment, someone knocked on the door. He froze, his porcelain face turning even paler than usual. Oh, no. A pleasant voice resounded from outside. Hey, boss, are you there? Don't answer. I already know that you are. His eyes widened. His voice shook as he whispered. She found me. Chapter 3003. The returned Sonny felt a chill running down his spine when he imagined Aiko barging into Revel's chambers and finding him there. Luckily, that did not happen, because Revel unceremoniously pushed him out into the corridor, slamming the door behind him with a resounding bang. So, he was caught in the corridor instead. Damnation! Sonny regained his balance and slowly looked up. Aiko was there, floating about a meter above the floor, looking down at him and smiling sweetly. Hey, boss. Sonny sighed. It was really unfair. Considering Aiko's petite stature, he wasn't supposed to have to crane his neck to look at her. And yet, she had developed a bad habit of looming over him as of late, which made him miss the good old days of inhabiting the body of a 3-meter-tall shadow spawn in the second nightmare. Oh yeah, hey, boss. A low voice resounded from behind Aiko, making Sonny sigh once more and look even higher. The reason why the resident shadow fairy was floating high above the floor these days was standing behind her, staring at Sunny with a guarded expression. It was a giant of a man, no, a mountain of a man, whose prodigious height could only be compared to his imposing width. It was Steve, the sleeper who had been in charge of the memory arsenal of the Bright Castle once, serving Gunlaug, the same Steve who had been killed during the siege of the Crimson Spire. Seeing him out and about, unmistakably alive, was just as weird for Sunny as seeing Sunny rule the Forgotten Shore must have been for Steve. Is he really alive, though? And was Steve really Steve? Cassie's supreme ability was truly mysterious, bordering on ineffable even, emanating a subtle scent of divinity. Summoning things she remembered into reality could only be described as miraculous, and those things weren't simply manifestations of mental images stored in her memory. They weren't illusions or cheap phantoms. Once summoned, they were real. Take the giant man in front of Sunny, for example. He was not merely a facsimile acting out the role of a person who had been Steve, no different from an echo. Instead, he had a sense of self, carried the memories of the true Steve, and had as much free will as any other human. He also possessed a soul, a true shadow, could command his aspect, and was recognized by the spell as one of its carriers. If there was one difference between ordinary living beings and those manifested by Cassie, it was that the latter simply vanished after being destroyed, leaving no trace of themselves in the world, not even their shades. Apart from that, though, they were ostensibly real, which did not mean that they were the original. But if they were a flawless copy of the original, then was there really a difference? Hell if I know. Sunny did not know if that mattered either. What mattered was that all the sleepers Cassie had met in the Dark City, more than 1,000 of them, were alive once again. Granted, they weren't sleepers anymore. Soon after Cassie summoned them back to the world of the living from beyond the grave, they all tethered themselves to various citadels in the dream realm and became awakened. In fact, a few were already masters, having conquered the second nightmare soon after returning from beyond. With that, Cassie had mostly exhausted the limits of her supreme ability. She could not manifest any more supreme beings, since that spot was already taken by herself. The dreamers of the Dark City accounted for all the dormant and awakened memories she could summon, constantly drawing on her essence at the same rate as it was replenished. She could still call upon a small number of transcendent items or beings, and as for Ascended, according to Cassie, she could indefinitely sustain the manifestation of 49 masters. Only a handful of people she had summoned ascended so far, so there was still plenty of room for others to grow. 7 of them could even become saints without overwhelming her aspect. And by the time more of the former dreamers of the Dark City were ready to challenge the second or third nightmares, her domain would have grown stronger, granting her more spirit essence, and therefore greater capacity to manifest living beings of all ranks. That was the plan, at least. Sunny stared at Steve darkly, prompting the giant man to shift in discomfort. What? Why are you looking at me like this, boss? Sunny remained silent for a short while, then shook his head. It's because my feelings are hurt. He threw his hands into the air. All the trouble I went to. Collecting every single bone, building a gorgeous grave for you guys. I even wrote such a beautiful, poignant epitaph. How do you think I feel now that you were walking around brazenly alive? All my efforts were wasted. Steve coughed awkwardly. Well, thank you for your efforts. He paused for a moment before adding politely, I'm sure that it is a very nice grave. I should really visit sometime. Sunny waved a hand. Ah, forget it. His tone was disheartened. Cassie gave the people she had brought back from the dead free choice of what to do with their lives. And they were not beholden to her, or to anyone, really, so they could do whatever they wished. Not that coming back to life after a decade of being dead was an easy thing, especially since many of them had spent years lost on the Forgotten Shore before dying in the shadow of the Crimson Spire. The world had changed in their absence. In fact, it was almost unrecognizable now. The world was ending for one, and the woman who had led them into the final battle, or war responsible for their deaths prior to that, ruled it. Some of the dreamers of the Dark City, like Gunlaug, had gone missing more than 20 years ago. The people whom they had known were now gone or unfamiliar. Some were welcomed back. Some found their old homes empty and destroyed. Like Castor, the heir of the Han Li clan was back. But the Han Li clan itself did not exist anymore. Seeing him again had felt very strange for Sunny, especially because Castor was still a teenager, while Sunny himself was now 29. The only thing stranger was to see Harper, the young man whom Sunny had killed once. get reunited with his family. Cassie said that she had chosen to bring the dreamers of the Dark City back because of their potential. But from what Sonny knew, Harper, and a few others like him, were not in a hurry to realize that potential. In fact, they never wanted to experience anything like the violence and bloodshed they had experienced on the Forgotten Shore ever again. Most of the former dreamers, though, were quite motivated. They had scattered in every direction, quickly making names for themselves. Gunlaug was in the Storm Sea now, helping the river people build floating cities. Castor was retained by a legacy clan ruling one of the citadel cities in the basin of the River of Tears. Gemma and Keto were in Ravenheart, the latter working under St. Bliss to hasten the agricultural development of the Dream Realm. Dozens of the former handmaidens joined Sation and their sisters in Ravenheart as well. More than a few of the people Cassie had brought back to life stayed behind, to serve as her personal assistants. But most of them joined the Firekeepers. It was ironic, really. The original Firekeepers, those of them who had survived Godgrave, were all gone now, having split into 6 cohorts to challenge 6 nightmare seeds and become saints. The Awakened, who had been recruited by the Firekeepers after the war, meanwhile, had all forgotten, becoming members of Changing Star's personal guard. So the veterans of the Forgotten Shore Cassie had manifested were like the second generation of the Firekeepers, taking the place of their former comrades while the first generation was away. Sonny gave Steve a long look. None of them was as crazy as this guy, though, who had gone right back to the Forgotten Shore and was now a member of the Shadow Clan, working under Aiko in the Dark Castle. Sonny shook his head. What a lunatic. Why was he constantly surrounded by crazy people? Well, anyway, what do you want, Aiko? I was very busy, you know. Busy destroying Revel's supply of junk food. Aiko stared at Sonny for a long while, making him feel unnerved. And then, he suddenly found himself in a tight embrace. I love you, boss. Sonny's blood turned cold. His hair stood on end. What are you planning? He looked down, and at the exact same moment, Aiko looked up, gracing him with a brilliant smile. I really do.
Today is the Remembrance Day, is it not? So I just wanted to thank you. Frozen by fear, Sonny nodded slowly. Yes, it is. So what? Was he seeing things? Or were her eyes glistening with tears? No, they really were. Aiko's voice trembled. What do you mean, so what? Boss, do you know how beautiful it is to be the only person who remembers every scientific advancement, societal trend, and business development that has happened since the Godgrave War, while all your competitors don't? She hugged him tighter and beamed. Forget war profiteering, boss. Forget colonialism. Aiko let out a dreamy sigh. Insider trading. That's the way. Chapter 3004. Secluded Training. A blackened ruin was drowning in darkness, covered by a veil of ash. Far in the distance, the lightless dome of the nebulous sky was breached, torrents of light pouring into the dark depths. Dozens of waterfalls plummeted from great heights, giving birth to innumerable streams and rivers. The water flowed through the ruins too, filling it with a melodious rustle. A young woman was sitting by one of the streams with her eyes closed, resting on the crumbled remains of a terrifying Asura. These were the hollows of Godgrave, and the young woman was Rain, promise of a distant sky. A storm was raging somewhere above, but all she could hear here in the dark ruins was the quiet murmur of rushing water. She could hear the whispers of the call that assaulted her mind like powerful waves as well. There was an immense ziggurat towering above the ruins, and on top of it rested a seed of nightmare, the seed of nightmare that her cohort had entered a long time ago and had not conquered yet. Rain had spent several months camping here in the hollows, waiting for their return. Monsters of the Scarlet Jungle rarely ventured close to the breach in the dome of the Great Hollow, and when they did, she pinned them to the ground with arrows and drove them mad with viciously cruel epithets. The ruin had become quite a sinister place because of it, but she remained focused and unperturbed. Rain had not come to the hollows simply to wait for her friends to return. In truth, she was in secluded training, slowly searching for the path to transcendence. She had not taken even the first step on that path yet, but washed over by the call of nightmare, and the quiet murmur of flowing water. Rain felt like she could almost feel it. Transcendence is different from ascension. An aloof voice resounded from the water, where her distorted reflection could barely be seen on the surface of rushing water. To become ascended, one has to gradually rebuild their soul core by letting ascended essence wash over it. However, transcendence is fundamentally different from both awakening and ascension. To become transcendent is to infuse yourself into the world, to expand the limits of your soul, allowing the world to encompass it as it encompasses the world. The voice was barely audible in the murmur of the flowing water, as if the stream itself was talking to rain. However, the world is vast, and we mortals are small and feeble. Our souls cannot encompass the world, but they can encompass an element of the world with which they share an innate connection. The source element. Therefore, the process of attaining transcendence differs from the process of ascension. You cannot simply build a transcendent soul core in the image of an ascended one. Rain sighed and opened her eyes, looking at her reflection on the surface of the stream. She was alone on the dark shore, and yet the figure of a tall man reflected in the water, standing behind her. The man continued, "An ascended soul core is a monolith. The structure of a transcendent core has to be different. It has to be porous, so that the essence of the world, the spirit essence, could flow through it, changing it from within. Hence, there are 3 steps to natural transcendence. First, one has to achieve a state of unity with the world and find their source element. Second, one has to guide the source essence to and through their soul core. Finally, the source essence itself will transform your soul core into that of a transcendent, becoming a catalyst for the transformation of your entire being." He paused for a moment, then shook his head. "I expected that you would be able to transcend quite easily. After all, you already share a profound connection with the world. There is that snake of yours, as well. But it seems that I was wrong. It is in fact the opposite. Your aspect is a hindrance instead. You simply do not seem to possess a source element. Rather, your source element is too broad." So, it might be that your soul truly has to encompass the whole world to become transcendent. Rain smiled darkly. "Well, that's just great." The King of Nothing, whose reflection was standing behind hers, answered in a calm tone. Walking the path of ascension without the help of the nightmare spell was never going to be easy. So, before he could finish the sentence, a third voice resounded in the darkness. That one came from her shadow. "Some teacher you are," Mordred sighed heavily. Rain's shadow, meanwhile, crossed its arms. "No, really, very helpful. Great job. It has been a year already, and you have achieved nothing. But then again, what else did you expect, Rain? The man's title is the King of Nothing. Honestly, I don't even know why you bother listening to him." Rain winced and looked at her shadow. The shadow stared back at her. "I mean, you already have a stellar teacher, who is nicer, more competent, way more handsome, and just generally better in all regards. So, how about you stop associating with this guy? Returning to the river people would benefit you way more." Rain shrugged. Not receiving the answer he wished he would hear, Sunny turned to stare at the reflection of Mordred. "And you? What are you doing, hanging around my disciple like a creep? A grown man stalking a young woman's reflection, how foul." How many times did I tell you to get lost? Mordred met his gaze with a somber expression and scoffed. It's not like I want to be here either, but a promise is a promise. I promise to share my understanding of natural transcendence with your sister, so that is what I must do. The King of Nothing had disappeared into the mists of the Hollow Mountains after the Dreamspawn's defeat. He seemed reluctant to be around people, living in a self-imposed exile there. From what Sunny knew, there were only 3 exceptions to the rule. Mordred kept in contact with Morgan, awkwardly trying to build a relationship with the woman who was his sister, but also not the sister he had known and cherished. He also communicated with Cassie, mostly regarding the issues that had to be discussed or negotiated with Nephis and Sunny. And lastly, he talked to Rain, whom he had promised to help once. Even though the old Mordred was dead, Sunny did not like the new Mordred one bit. A promise? Huh? Do you know what I think? Rain's shadow pointed an accusing finger at the reflection. I think that you are jealous. Couldn't find your own disciple, so now you are trying to steal mine? In your dreams. Mordred opened his mouth to answer, but at that moment, Rain raised her hand, calling them to silence. She remained still for a few moments, as if listening to something, and then turned her head with a sudden smile. Rain's eyes glinted. The call is gone. Far in the distance, the seed of nightmare was collapsing on itself, disintegrating in a flash of brilliant light. Chapter 3, 005. Since you've been gone. Rain ascended the ancient ziggurat, as the seed of nightmare atop it died. Just before she reached the vast platform, a blinding flash tore apart the darkness of the hollows, momentarily painting the world in radiant hues of day. By the time the golden brilliance vanished, Rain was already at the top of the towering ziggurat. The blackened ruins of the ancient city sprawled far below her. She inhaled deeply, fixed the puppeteer's shroud, tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear, and headed toward the center of the platform. As she was approaching it, there was suddenly a thunderous roar, and a devastating shockwave crashed into her, making a mess out of her hair once again. Damn it. All Wakened had a tendency to unconsciously activate their new aspect abilities immediately after escaping a nightmare. That was what she had been told, at least. One of her friends had received quite a devastating one, it seemed. As the dust settled, she saw 5 figures rising to their feet unsteadily. Tamar, Tel, Ray, Fleur, June. Rain's smile widened, and a heavy burden lifted from her heart. It looked like they had all made it out of the nightmare alive. She knew that they would. Her brother would have sensed the destruction of their marks otherwise, but knowing and seeing it with her own eyes was different. Rain took a deep breath and then headed forward. Her friends looked dazed, having just experienced the rebirth of rising to a new rank. Ignoring their disoriented state, Rain caught Tama in a tight embrace. "Welcome back, Tama. Or should I say, Master Tama." Grinning, Rain let go of her friend. Fleur's turn was next. The young woman let out a surprised squeal as Rain hugged her. "Ascended Fleur!" "It's an honor. Tell of White Feather." "Oh my, I'm so glad I spared you life that time." Tella received a hug too. Ray got a pat on the shoulder, while June had to settle for a smile and a wink. By the time Rain was done greeting her friends, they finally managed to compose themselves.
Their second nightmare was a very long one, so it was going to take them a while to truly come to their senses. They had returned to their own bodies after inhabiting someone else for more than a year, after all. And on top of that, their bodies were ascended now. It was a lot to take in, Even Rain, who had simply closed her eyes one day and opened them as a master, spent months slowly getting accustomed to her new self. Eventually, though, Tamar managed to smile. Rain, it's good to be... Wait, she stared at Rain fixedly, her eyes slowly widening. You're a master too? How did this happen? Rain coughed in embarrassment. She knew that becoming a master had made her appearance more outstanding, but she didn't think that her friends would notice the change immediately. She lingered for a moment and then said, with a smile, "Oh, I don't quite remember. It just happened one day." Her friends all stared at her with dubious expressions. Rain cleared her throat. "I know it sounds weird, but I really don't remember. Right? You guys don't know." They looked at each other, troubled. "Don't know what?" Rain sighed. "Let's just say that a lot has happened while you were gone. Speaking of which, you have an appointment with Lady Cassia. I've been told to bring you to her as soon as you conquer the nightmare." Tamar frowned. "What has happened exactly?" Rain scratched the back of her head. "Oh well, let's see. An evil sovereign fell from the moon? All of humanity fell under a mind hex? There was a second domain war. Oh, Cassie is a supreme now. Mordred killed Mordred. Everyone lost a couple of years' worth of memories, and both worlds were in a state of emergency for a long while as a result. The longing domain was destroyed, and then restored. Right, and there's a nation of ancient people from the Dream Realm living in the Storm Sea now, complete with their own supreme. That's the gist of it, I guess." Her friends just stared at her in stunned silence. Rain remained silent for a short while, then smiled warmly. "Anyway, congratulations, everyone. You really did well. You did well to come back alive." Her smile widened a little. "Sunny is congratulating you too. You made him proud." As if to confirm her words, her shadow clapped silently, then made fists and shook them in the air. Tamar nodded slowly. "I see. Thank you, boss. And Rain, you'll need to explain everything slowly, on the way to wherever Lady Cassia is." Tell, meanwhile, glanced around with a bewildered expression. She pointed to the ground. "Hey, Rain's shadow just moved on its own. Did nobody else notice?" Tamar looked at her in confusion, then frowned. "Oh, right. You don't know." Tell seemed exasperated. "Know what?" Tamar hesitated. "Oh, well, let's see." Soon, the 6 of them descended to Ziggurat and dove into the ruins, heading to where Rain had made her camp. In the process, they walked past scores of nightmare creatures who were pinned to the ground or to the walls of crumbling buildings with dozens of arrows, all writhing in horrible pain, but unable to die. Tamar spared one of them a disturbed look. "What the hell, Rain?" Rain shrugged nonchalantly. "What? I spent a few months here waiting. You can finish them off if you'd like." That was what Tamar did, and by the time they reached the camp, each member of the cohort was carrying a few soul shards. Rain was prepared, of course. Summoning the bag of withholding, she swiftly produced a veritable feast. Cassie had to check the minds of everyone who had been in a nightmare when the memories of humanity were erased, but that could wait. First, they had to celebrate the return of the cohort, and their new status as masters, as well. And after that, Rain would have to lead the cohort to the Vanishing Lake, return to NQC with them, then travel to Bastion from there. She had no doubt that they would be able to catch up as they went. It seemed that her secluded training was over. Chapter 3006, Boons of a Nightmare. It did not take them long to travel to Vanishing Lake. Tamar summoned her echo, the grotesque wolf, while Telly summoned the griffin she had inherited from her mother. June had a mount as well. It was a sleek echo that would have doubtlessly turned heads on the streets of Bastion if he ever wanted to draw attention to himself. Rain rode the wolf echo with Tamar. She had already brought her friends up to speed with the current events, so it was time to satiate her own curiosity. Your nightmare lasted for a long while. What, exactly, happened there? Tamar did not answer immediately. Eventually, she sighed. It took place here, in Mictlan, in Godgrave, I mean. Only not the Godgrave we know, in Godgrave that existed once, a long time ago, before the sky above it was covered by a veil of clouds. She remained silent for a moment, then added in a somber tone, It was still hell, though. The Scarlet Jungle was not as powerful as it is today, since it could never create a foothold on the surface of the Sun Killer without the cloud veil. Oh, the Sun Killer is what people of Mictlan called this giant skeleton, while Mictlan was their word for the Hollows. The jungle was still teeming with abominations, was still ever-growing and relentless, was still an endless source of corruption. Tamar exhaled slowly. We were given the roles of awakened warriors in a conflict between two transcendent powerhouses of Mictlan. One of them was Quetzalcoatl, the winged serpent. The other was known as Shatana. The two of them had different opinions about the fate of this land and its people. She shook her head. The locals believed that the Sun Killer was still alive, and that the Scarlet Jungle was a manifestation of his will to be reborn. The White Abyss, the sky above Godgrave, was therefore meant to prevent him from ever becoming complete, and the sacred duty of the people of Mictlan was to ensure that the Sun Killer never defeats the White Abyss. Tamar lingered for a few moments before continuing. The problem was that the people of Mictlan were just as trapped in the hollows as the Scarlet Jungle was, lost in eternal darkness. And without access to the surface, they were slowly going extinct. Their extinction was not obvious yet at the time of the nightmare, but it was easy to predict. So, she grimaced. So, Shatana wanted to do something about it, even if it meant turning their backs on the sacred duty of guarding the Sun Killer. Quetzalcoatl, meanwhile, was vehemently against betraying their purpose. So, the two of them opposed each other, and their difference of opinion eventually turned into open hostility. Tamar smiled bitterly. Basically, we had a choice of helping Shatana succeed or helping Quetzalcoatl prevent her from succeeding. Teyawana ya janbao ji. Well, I was following this, Telly Tusik, and Telly said, Do you see? Teyawana ya ji. So, what did you choose? Telly looked ahead. Telly and I wanted to support Quetzalcoatl, while Ray and Fleur wanted to support Shatana and her daughters. In the end, June had the deciding vote, and he chose Quetzalcoatl, not because he agreed with what Quetzalcoatl represented, but simply because Quetzalcoatl was far more powerful, and siding with him was going to increase our chances of survival. She fell silent for a few moments. So, we infiltrated Shatana's factions, revealed her plans, and helped Quetzalcoatl kill her before she could create the Cloud Veil. Her and her people, I mean. Dooming the civilization of Mictlan to disappear far sooner than it would have disappeared otherwise. Tamar shook her head. I am glad to have survived, but that nightmare, it really left a bad taste in my mouth. I still don't know if we made the correct choice, and I think I never will. Rain put a hand on her shoulder. Surviving was the correct choice. So I am glad June was there to make it. By the time they reached Vanishing Lake, Rain managed to satiate her curiosity and learn what their ascended abilities were, as well. The shock wave that almost blasted her off the ziggurat had been produced by Tamar. Her ascended ability was quite a versatile one, but one that demanded a long period of training to master. It allowed her to transform momentum into kinetic energy, as well as channel that force in a variety of ways. In short, the faster Tamar was moving, the more devastation she could cause. She could create a widespread explosion of kinetic force around herself, or shape the blast into a narrow cone in front of her, for example. Interestingly enough, Her momentum was consumed by the transition, bringing her to a stop. That ostensibly freed her from the shackles of inertia, which opened a whole spectrum of tactical possibilities in combat. The more insidious side of her ascended ability, though, was that the momentum Tamar could drain and transform was not limited to her own. She could augment her swordsmanship by turning the momentum of her sword into pure concussive force, for example, or she could drain the momentum of the swords and arrows aimed at her, or even of her enemies, if they were close enough. Tell's ascended ability was equally as potent. The dormant ability of the young lady of the White Feather clan allowed her to create electric currents within her body, which augmented her physical prowess and made her far faster and stronger than most awakened of equal rank. Her awakened ability, meanwhile, allowed her to channel these currents outward, either augmenting her weapons or simply firing them off like bolts of lightning. Her ascended ability, though, it allowed her to manipulate magnetic force instead.
Needless to say, the applications of that power were endless. From hastening her sword to manipulating the movement of the enemy's blade, she could do it all, as long as the weapons were magnetic, of course. She could even fly by using her ascended ability on her own armor, and those were merely combat uses. There were countless things Tell could do outside of combat as well. She could spend years trying to discover them all and still only scratch the surface. Ray's ascended ability, meanwhile, was just weird. His dormant ability made him hard to notice, while his awakened ability simply made him invisible and imperceptible. Her ascended ability, however, allowed him to apply these qualities to other objects and beings. For example, Ray could apply his dormant ability to a building and make it so that no one would notice it, even if they walked past it 1,000 times. Alternatively, he could make the whole cohort invisible, although that would drain his essence much faster. In fact, the expenditure of essence depended not only on what he was trying to conceal, but also on who he was trying to conceal it from. Nevertheless, it was an ability with an incredible level of utility. And lastly, there was Fleur, the healer of the cohort. Her dormant ability allowed her to alleviate fatigue, while her awakened ability allowed her to stem bleeding and hasten the process of natural recovery. Her ascended ability, meanwhile, granted her the power to augment the bodies of her allies, making them stronger and far more resilient than they would usually be. Naturally, most members of the cohort were also members of the Shatter clan, which meant that their marks had risen to a new rank as well. So, the boons granted to them by the Mark of Shadow grew more potent as well. Fleur was the last, because June simply refused to share with anyone what his new power was. He insisted that it was because true professionals did not reveal their cards, but there were too many fishy things about that explanation. If anything, it seemed as if he was embarrassed to tell them what his ascended ability could do. Old people are weird. Rain scratched her nose. I wonder how I stack up against them. None of them could talk with ancient towers, that was for sure, and none of these abilities could beat the versatility and utility of Rain's epithets either. Overall, she was just glad that her friends were back from the nightmare in one piece. Soon, the vanishing lake appeared in front of them. Having spent months living in a tent, Rain could not wait to get back to civilization. Chapter 3007. New Meaning. The vanishing lake was overflowing with turbulent water, so Rain and her companions had to wait for the ferry to arrive on its shore. They dismissed their echoes and rested on the ground, knowing that it could take a while. Rain looked at her reflections briefly, but there was nothing there. The King of Nothing had left her alone, now that their lesson was over. Tamar, Ray, and Fleur were looking at the lake as well, their faces betraying a hint of distant wonder. They were still coming to terms with becoming ascended, so Rain remained silent, giving them time to grow accustomed to their new reality. June might have been excited as well, but He maintained his usual nonchalant demeanor. Tell, meanwhile, now that the excitement of their return had died down, she was slowly starting to look distressed. Eventually, she grabbed her head and looked down. Oh, I should probably let my mother know that I am back, shouldn't I? The young heiress of the White Feather clan did not seem to be happy about becoming a master. If anything, she looked strangely terrified. A quiet groan escaped from her lips. Rain looked at Tell and shrugged. You know what to do, don't you? She smiled faintly. Just hide behind your father. He'll probably absorb the worst of the impact. Tell sighed heavily, prompting Rain to add in a consoling tone, for what it's worth, your parents probably won't have time to be angry with you. She paused for a moment, then said gingerly, the whole world is falling apart, and every nightmare creature north of the Black Mountains is on the move. So, I doubt that you'll be punished too severely. You're a master now, after all, and a powerful one at that. Nobody can afford to sideline a master these days, even for the sake of parental discipline. Teller raised an eyebrow. The world is falling apart? Do you mean more than it was falling apart when we left? Rain nodded. Yes, in more senses than one, really. The nightmare creatures are migrating because of the King of Nothing and actually, never mind. Point is, someone flattened a good portion of the Black Mountains and forced the River of Tears to change course. So all Citadel cities are under immense pressure right now, including the Sanctuary. She spent some time explaining the difficult situation the human settlements all across the Dream Realm faced. The human settlements in the waking world were not faring any better. In fact, one could say that they were faring even worse. In the end, Rain finished her explanation and looked at Tamar. She remained silent for a long while, and then sighed. I am sorry, Tamar. I have some bad news to deliver as well. Tamar raised an eyebrow and smiled wryly. This wasn't the bad news yet? Rain studied her for a moment before answering. You must feel like you are one step closer to your goal now that you are a master. I know that you wanted to reclaim your clan's citadel one day. Sadly, that won't be possible anymore. Tamar frowned. Why? Who is ruling it now? Rain shook her head. No one is ruling it. I'm sorry, Tamar, but the citadel, it's simply gone. It was destroyed in the Second Domain War. Tamar remained silent for a bit, then looked away. I see. She gazed at the distant silhouette of the vanishing lake citadel, the blackened ruins that had once been a beautiful temple, and smiled. You want to become a builder, don't you? Well then, I guess you will just have to build me a new one. Sorrow will rule the weeping goddess once again, someday. One way or another. Rain chuckled. I think you are overestimating me, Tamar. I might be a student of practical engineering, but I doubt that I can build a true citadel. Still looking away, Tamar shrugged. It doesn't matter. The citadels don't matter as much as they used to these days, and in the future, they will mean even less. This time, it was Rain's turn to be surprised. They will? Tamar nodded. Yes. Why do people live in citadel cities here in the Dream Realm? It is because the awakened and ascended warriors protecting these cities need a gateway to travel between the Dream Realm and the waking world. That is why citadels became the first human settlements in the Dream Realm, and it is why cities grew around them as well. However, she gave Rain a poignant look. Didn't you say that the world is falling apart? The Dream Realm is slowly consuming the world, and once it swallows it entirely, awakened and masters won't have the need to travel between two worlds anymore. The gateways will lose their meaning, and citadel cities will lose their necessity. Tana shook her head. Each citadel offers a unique boon, true, but there are plenty of things just as important as ancient sorcery. How easily accessible a stronghold is, how long it takes to travel to the settlement from the next one over, and so on. These things will matter more than the components of most citadels. She looked at Rain and smiled. The old citadel of my clan was supremely defensible, and as for how easy it is to travel to and from, it stood at the source of the Lake of Tears, so, naturally, it was connected to all the other citadels in the basin of the River of Tears. Tamar chuckled. So, there will be a human settlement at the Lake of Tears sooner or later, even if it won't be a citadel. The only question is, who will rule it? Her smile widened a little. Me. It is going to be me, and I hope that you will help me make it possible. Rain remained silent for a long while, then nodded solemnly. I didn't think about it like that, but you are right. Fine. If you reconquer the Lake of Tears in the future, I will help you build a stronghold there, even better than the old one. She smiled. Rain had indeed not thought about what would happen to citadels after their main function was rendered useless. Once the gateways lost their power, humans would be able to settle the dream realm wherever they chose, and wherever they could survive as well. So, who knew? Maybe she would help build one or two of such settlements herself, putting the great citadels left behind by the ancient people of the dream realm to shame. Rain smiled. It seems like our ferry is here. Far away, a small boat was moving across the lake. It was time for them to finally leave Godgrave. Chapter 3008. Beautiful Dream. The citadel that had stood in the center of the vanishing lake for thousands of years was all but destroyed in a battle between Changing Star and Moonveil. Now, it resembled a blackened ruin, with only the underground chambers remaining intact. After the war, those who refused to join the human domain were exiled to the charred ruins. They cleaned most of the debris away and used them to raise a makeshift rampart, then built a modest settlement inside. The homes built by the exiles still remained, but the exiles themselves were gone. Instead, a strange mix of people populated the citadel now. Some of them were awakened warriors of the Firekeepers, some were mundane humans, and some had no discernible affiliation.
Rain even thought that she noticed the characteristic garments of the river people among them. The settlement had been expanded and improved, with many new structures standing between the flimsy hovels. The hovels were built from the blackened wood, but the new additions were composed of stone and alloy. Everywhere Rain looked, strange piles of stones were laid on the ground in neat rows. The stones made her skin crawl, so she looked closer and recognized them for what they were, the shattered remains of the ancient asuras that could be found in various ruins across Godgrave. Some were hoisted on thick chains, hanging above ground like broken giants. Tamar studied her with a subtle frown. What is all this? And where are the exiles? Rain hesitated for a moment before answering. Most of the exiles are dead, and those who survived the war are not exiles anymore. As for what these guys are doing, I am not sure. None of this stuff was here when I visited a few months ago. But it wasn't difficult to surmise that whatever was happening in the vanishing lake had something to do with the encroaching apocalypse, simply because almost everything was. Now, more than ever, it felt like humanity was at war. It was fighting for survival on countless fronts, and all things people did were meant to sustain and develop the war machine in one way or another. Let me find the person in charge of the gateway. I'll get you guys back to the waking world in no time. Right. Think about where you want to establish your tethers while I am gone. You are ascended now, after all. You will never have to see the inside of a sleeping pod ever again. Rain went to talk to the nearest firekeepers. Officially, the members of the Shadow Clan were all special government envoys, so they could travel anywhere they want without drawing attention. This time, too, it did not take long for them to gain access to the gateway. Standing in front of it, Rain sighed. "Are you ready?" Her friends responded by nodding silently. She smiled. "Then let's go." Traveling between the realms was not a simple affair these days. It used to be that only two types of awakened populated the dream realm: those who had entered it in their sleep, and those who were lost. The former returned to their physical bodies after touching a gateway, while the latter were doomed to remain in the dream realm forever, or until they conquered the second nightmare at least. But things were different now. Countless people had entered the dream realm through the dream gates, crossing the realm boundary in the flesh instead of merely in spirit. So there was no sleeping body for them to return to. The gateway still worked for them, though, albeit the process was more complicated. The masters returned to the place where they had placed their tether. Awakened were not capable of leaving a mark on the world yet, however, so the spell did it for them. It sent them across the realm boundary to the spot in the waking world where they had been last. There were only two exceptions to that rule. The first exception were the lost, who did not possess a true body, and therefore could not return to the waking world. The second exception was mostly a theoretical one. It was the people who had never been to the waking world at all. Before, there had been only two humans like that. One of them was Saint Ling, Effie's child. She carried him across the realm boundary herself, allowing him to leave an imprint on Earth. The other one was the Dreamspawn, who had been born in the dream realm. No one knew how he crossed the realm boundary for the first time, only that Clan Valor assisted him in that undertaking. Now, however, there were myriad humans who had never been to the waking world. They were the river people. Rain was not sure if anyone attempted to throw one of them at a gateway and see what would happen, but believed that there wasn't. In any case, she and her companions could use the gateway of the vanishing lake to return to Earth. All of them had entered the dream realm in the flesh, which was why the spell sent them to the vicinity of the seed they destroyed, instead of returning them to their sleeping bodies before fusing their dream realm manifestation and the original physical shell together. But they had come from the waking world, which meant that they could return home without the help of a saint or a friendly supreme, if they wished to. In fact, the friendly supreme in question was in a more troublesome position. Sunny usually accompanied Rain by hiding in her shadow, and he was about to cross the realm boundary with her. However, unlike her and the members of her cohort, he wasn't welcome on Earth. The waking world rejected his presence and strained to push him out, so he could only ever visit briefly. So Rain had not been spending a lot of time in the waking world.
She was only planning to use it as a waypoint between Godgrave and Bastion today, though, so it was not a big problem. It feels odd. Tamar's voice was uncharacteristically subdued. Rain looked at her and raised an eyebrow. What? Her friend lingered for a moment, just returning to Earth. We spent so long in the nightmare that, at some point, it was our lives in the real world that felt like a dream. Tamar glanced down at her hands and slowly made them into fists. NEC-USC, with its enormous alloy towers, maglev trains, and PTVs, suddenly seems like an odd fairy tale. Rain studied her for a bit, then shrugged with a smile.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
I have never challenged a nightmare, but after spending most of my adult years in the dream realm, my previous life in the waking world feels like a dream. Rain steadied her for a dream realm of NEC-USC, .DUC, aliquise Joren, MEC-USC, frantic rub, DUC, DUB, aliquise Joren, which talk like the night. NEC-U. A beautiful dream, one that will be dispelled soon, disappearing without a trace. She turned to the gateway. It is strange to think that the waking world will only remain in our memories one day soon, isn't it? But not yet. Soon, the six of them crossed the realm boundary and returned to Earth. Chapter 3009, Dreamscape 2.0. The waking world met Sunny with the usual inhospitable pressure. In fact, it was stronger than usual because, due to Rain unexpectedly returning to NQSC, there were two of his incarnations there at the moment. One was about to leave soon. The Dream Gate connecting NQSC to Bastion was about to close according to schedule, so his sister and her friends had to use their cover identities as government agents and hurry through. The second incarnation, however, was going to linger for a while longer. At the moment, he was quietly walking down the street, sticking to the shadows. NQSC was changing with unnerving speed. It was different every time Sunny visited, and the shift that had happened after the Dream Spawns crisis was especially dire. The city had never felt that tense, fragile, and warlike, but not today. Today was Remembrance Day, and people were actually in a festive mood. After all, they got to rest from the demanding burdens of their jobs and spend time with their close ones. The atmosphere was somewhat bittersweet because of the solemn nature of the holiday, and numerous passers-by had wistful expressions on their faces, but mostly, people were excited. That was because Lady Changing Star was set to deliver a speech in a few hours. Her fame was as staggering as ever, and since most subjects of the Longing Domain did not get to see their goddess often, her public appearances were always highly anticipated events. The people in the waking world were going to watch the speech on the public screens in the squares or in the privacy of their homes. The people in the dream realm, meanwhile, were split between two groups. Those who lived in Bastion or Ravenheart could try to see Changing Star with their own two eyes, while the rest of them were going to see her in their dreams. Quite literally. Instant communication had always been a problem for the inhabitants of the dream realm, and it only grew more pressing as more and more settlers arrived. The Citadel cities were separated by the vast and perilous expanse of wilderness, but they often needed to exchange information in real time. For the longest time, the most convenient form of communicating information across vast distances was to use the waking world as an intermediary. An awakened in the westernmost citadel city of the Tyr River Basin and an awakened in the easternmost citadel of the former Sword Domain could be living in the same apartment in NQSC, so they freely exchange information as soon as they climbed out of their sleeping pods. In fact, the government had long established special communication dormitories, which housed one resident from each of humanity's citadel cities. Legacy clans had their own chains of awakened in place, as well. But even that method involved too many steps and was too slow for the reality of the encroaching apocalypse, not to mention its inherent limitations. So, a new method of communication has been developed to hasten the process. That method was created by Saint Thane, the dream merchant. Thane had suffered greatly during the dream spawn crisis, but life went on, so he had to move on with his life as well. The version of Dreamscape for the Dream Room he had been working on for a long while was finally complete and deployed, allowing for people living in distant citadel cities, mundane or awakened, to communicate in their dreams. All they had to do was fall asleep in a special runic circle. There were special dormitories built in each citadel city, each fitted with scores of private quarters where the runic circle had already been drawn. Alternatively, affluent individuals could commission a sorcerer to create the enchantment in their own residences. Sorcerers were still a rare breed, but there were more and more of them with each year. That was because the knowledge of runic sorcery, which had been fervently guarded by the great clans before, was now being freely taught to anyone who wanted to learn. Special courses were established at the Awakened Academy, and there were runic schools opening up in various citadels as well. So, the speech Nephis was about to give would be shown both on myriad screens in the waking world and in the Dreamscape, making it available for everyone who wanted to hear it. Of course, Sunny was going to hear it with his own 2 ears. In fact, he was going to be on the stage with Nephis when she delivered the speech, even if no one would know that he was there, hidden in the shadows. Well, at least one of his incarnations would. This incarnation, meanwhile, approached the door of an unassuming restaurant and walked inside. The waiter guided him to a private booth where 3 people were waiting for him. Seeing him, they rose and straightened their postures. Sunny smiled faintly. At ease, the people he was meeting today on Remembrance Day were Quentin, Kim, and Luster, the last living soldiers of the First Irregular Company. "You made it, Captain." Kim smiled and saluted him. It was strange to hear her addressing that way again. Sunny was already used to being called boss by the agents of the Shadow Clan, so a bittersweet emotion momentarily rose in his chest. She remained silent for a moment, then scoffed. "How many times do I have to say it? It's Major, damn it. I was promoted ages ago." Chuckling, they sat down. There was a bottle with strong liquor on the table, the expensive stuff brewed especially for the awakened. Sunny knew that it would have no effect on him, still, but today was not a day for tea, coffee, water, or wine. It was a day for something bitter. He looked at Quentin, who reached for the bottle.
"Jam. Beth couldn't make it?"
Quentin nodded with a smile. "You know how she is, Captain. The festivities are expected to put an unprecedented strain on the electrical grid, so Beth is stuck in her office." He poured the liquor into the glasses. Before the irregulars could raise a toast, however, Sunny stopped them. "Not yet. We are waiting for one more." A few minutes later, the door opened again, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop by a few degrees. A day after a road, the members of his cohort jumped to their feet. The members of his cohort jumped to their feet again, far faster than they had when he arrived. "Colonel! Lady Jet!" Wow. Jet glanced at them, her icy blue eyes emanating a palpable chill. Then she smiled wryly. "I hope I am not too late." The 5 of them settled behind the table and raised their glasses. Sunny inhaled deeply and remained silent for a few seconds. "In the end," he said, "to the First Irregular Company, bottoms up." Chapter 3010, Remembrance Day. And then Bill, that bastard, looks me right in the eye and says, "You look like someone who will die first. Let's be friends." Can you believe him? The sounds of laughter filled the private booth as Luster waved his empty glass in the air. Because having me around meant that he would not be the first, you see? What kind of messed up logic is that? He put his glass down and huffed a few times. Luster was pretty fired up, but his excitement slowly drained away. He stared at the table for a short while, and then said in a much more withdrawn tone, "Hell. Now I feel kind of guilty for not staying with him until the end. Maybe if I did, he would have really stayed alive." Sunny, Jet, Kim, Luster, and Quentin, they were all that remained of the First Irregular Company. The 7 cohorts of elite soldiers were reduced to only 5 people, and since today was Remembrance Day, these people had decided to gather and remember their fallen comrades fondly, or angrily, in Luster's case. Kim pushed him lightly. No one could have survived that. Only the captain. Jet, who was leaning back in her chair, smiled lazily. "Hey, I was there as well." She shook her head. "But you're right, no one could have survived the winter beast." Jet leaned forward, intending to pour herself another glass. Before she could, however, Quentin hurriedly grabbed the bottle with both hands and did it for her. She gave him a pleasant smile, then raised the glass and gulped the fiery liquid down. "Ah," Jet winced. I went back to Antarctica after becoming a saint, you know. I wanted to hunt that cursed thing down. But no luck. The winter beast was nowhere to be found. Someone had already killed it. She glanced at Sunny and smiled. I couldn't figure out who it was for the longest time, until my memories of this guy were restored. A corner of Sunny's mouth lifted briefly. He glanced away. Indeed.
That was the first thing I did. Sail across the ocean and hunt down the winter beast. Luster stared at him with wide eyes. But how did you kill that thing, Captain? Sunny gave him a deadpan look and shrugged. I bit it to death. There were a few seconds of silence, and then Luster let out an emotional sigh. Ah, it's so good to have you back, Captain. I mean, Boss. Captain Boss. Boss Captain. Sunny gave him a dubious glance and turned to Kim. I think he's had enough. Luster shook his head. No, you don't understand. I was like a lost chick without you, Captain. Even if I couldn't remember, I still felt it. The absence. And then some shady bastard came along and offered me to work for him. Oh, but he could never, ever, replace the captain, that insane bastard. Kim cleared her throat. Yes, I think that he's had enough. She remained silent for a few seconds and then added, but he is right. It is good to have you back, Captain. Quentin smiled. I'll drink to that. Jet pushed her glass in his direction silently. Indeed, you probably don't know, but I knew him the longest. In fact, I was the government awakened assigned to monitor him during the first nightmare. And do you guys want to know what was the first thing he said after coming to his senses? Sunny shifted on his chair. I don't think they need to hear that particular story. Kim raised an eyebrow. Why? What did you say, Captain? Jet laughed. Your breasts. Those were his first words. Kim's eyes widened. At the same time, her hand rose to prevent Luster's head from turning in Jet's direction. Not paying it any attention, Luster cried, That's my captain. I knew we were kindred spirits. Sunny sighed and covered his face with a palm. Jet, meanwhile, grinned. And guess what he said next? Sunny let out a groan. I think this was a bad idea. Sadly, their time together came to an end soon. All of them were incredibly busy, especially on a day like today, when the Shadow Clan was on the move in the shadows of humanity to make sure that the celebration did not end in disaster. Quentin left first, and Kim and Luster soon followed. The latter was a bit drunk, but his awakened physique was already sobering him up. In an hour or two, he would be back to his usual self. Only Sunny and Jet were left in the booth, sitting across from each other at the table. Jet stretched and let out a satisfied sigh. This was nice. Honestly, I don't think I had sat down once in the past year. There was simply too much to do. So, this get-together was my first break since the dream spawn. Sunny nodded with a dim expression. Yeah, I have 7 bodies, and even I feel a bit spent. Jet studied him for a short while, a relaxed smile playing on the lips, and then asked, How much longer can you stay? She knew that remaining in the waking world was not easy for Sunny, so the question had more than one meaning. He shrugged. A while longer. Why? Jet considered something for a bit, then emptied her glass and stood up. Come with me, then. I have a small surprise for you. Sunny raised an eyebrow, but followed her without asking any questions. They settled the bill, exited the restaurant, and walked toward Jet's PTV. Soon enough, the PTV was gliding along the streets of NQSC, traveling from one district to another. Soon enough, the surroundings began to look familiar to Sunny. Wait, isn't this the way? Jet took a turn, past the tram tracks, and entered a secluded residential district, one where green lawns seemed to cascade down a series of terraces. It was the terrace district where Sunny had lived once, next to Rain and her adoptive family. A minute later, the PTV stopped in front of a familiar house. Jet climbed outside and Sunny followed. "Jet, what are we doing here?" He studied the house for a while, then turned to him and smiled. "Here." Jet reached into the pocket of her uniform jacket and produced a set of keys. They glistened in the sunlight and then landed in Sunny's hand, who stared at them in confusion. She let out a satisfied sigh. "You are officially dead, so you can't really own a domicile. But it wasn't too difficult to pull some strings, assign you a fake identity, and register the house as yours. freewebnovel.com. Jet smiled. "Happy Remembrance Day, I guess. This is your house once again, Sunny." He gripped the keys in his hand. Chapter 3011. Times Are A-Changin'. Sunny looked at the familiar door, feeling emotions swell in his chest. It was funny, really. This modest house in a middle-range district of NQSC was not at all important, all things considered. Sunny ruled an entire region of the Dream Realm now. There was a whole city under his control, with countless homes that were far more grand and desirable than this one. He also had the Nameless Temple and the marvelous Mimic, who could take any form, not to mention that Sunny was wealthy enough to buy this entire district, not just one house. And still, he remembered becoming the owner of this home, with its gray walls and a cozy porch. How it made him feel. How exhilarated he had been, having become a homeowner after a lifetime of living on the streets. He remembered all the things that had happened in that home as well. Goodness. It felt like a lifetime ago. It certainly was, in more senses than one. 1,000 lifetimes, even. Sunny inhaled deeply and looked away from the door. It's quiet here. The terrace district was different from how he remembered it. There were far fewer people on the streets, and everything was quiet. Most of the homes seemed vacant, as if their owners had moved somewhere a long time ago. The green lawns he enjoyed looking at so much were still tended to, but if one looked closely, the signs of neglect were impossible to miss. Jet answered in a neutral tone. "Well, things change. This district was quite popular once, but a few years ago there was a Nightmare Gate emergency nearby. The public trains had to be rerouted because of the call, and the network connection became patchy. The gate was eventually closed, but it was already too late. People moved on. Some moved to the Dream Realm, most simply relocated to other parts of NQSC. She paused for a moment, then shrugged with a smile. Lucky for us, really. It would have been difficult to purchase this home if someone else was already living in it. Sunny nodded, feeling strangely wistful. Dismayed, even. The fact that the terrace district was deteriorating should not have been a surprise for him. But for some reason, it was a bit of a blow. He had never stopped to think about it, but this idyllic place always felt eternal in his mind. However, nothing was truly eternal in this world. Only the great void was. Jet's smile turned a little wistful as well. "Actually, it's a big problem." Sunny raised an eyebrow. "What is?" She gestured vaguely in the direction of the homes surrounding them. "Real estate. People know that they will have to leave for the Dream Realm eventually. And even if most of them won't be able to become settlers anytime soon, that knowledge is already influencing their decisions. Those who do leave for the Dream Realm need to sell their assets first. But nobody is buying. Why would they? Knowing that they would not get to own their purchases in the long run. So, the whole market has more or less collapsed. It's a mess." Jet shook her head. "The government had to establish a special agency that assists settlers in converting their assets to contribution points. These points can then be exchanged for stuff in the Dream Realm. Basically, we are buying all the things people cannot sell at a huge loss, en masse. But our pockets are not infinite. Don't tell anyone. But the government is actually this close to going bankrupt. She raised her hand, holding her thumb and index finger apart. Then she laughed. Oh, don't look so serious. The immortal flame has our backs, so it's going to be fine. Well, it will be tolerable at least. Then she looked at Sunny and raised an eyebrow. So, are you going to invite me inside or what? Sunny came to his senses and took a step toward the door. Welcome to my humble abode, St. Jet. Please make yourself at home. Once the door closed behind them, Sunny was met with the familiar view. His kitchen, where he had destroyed the fridge once, was to his right. The living room, where Nephis had burned his projector, was to his left. Further inside were the stairs leading to the second floor, as well as the elevator leading to the underground dojo where his sleeping pod used to stand. Things were different from how he had left them years ago, of course. But even if his time in this home had been relatively brief, no more than a couple of years, most of them spent in the dream realm, it still felt nice to return. Sunny remained silent for a long while, then turned to Jet. I'm afraid I won't be a good host. The fridge is empty. Also, I don't think the power is on. She grinned. Don't worry. I came prepared. The two of them settled at the table in the living room, where Jet produced a few items from a storage memory. Sunny stared at them for a few seconds, a dubious expression on his face. Are those rat packs? They were the infamous basic ration bag, the most common food people in the outskirts could procure. Each contained a tube of synth paste, several bland crackers, and a container of filtered water. Jet nodded, opening one of them and squeezing synth paste onto a colorless cracker. They sure are. She took a bite and exhaled slowly. Wow, just as terrible as I remember. Sunny stared at Jet in confusion, then opened another ration pack and repeated her actions.
The taste of synth paste, or rather, the utter lack of it, brought back memories, too many memories even, which was quite fitting for a holiday called Remembrance Day. Maybe that was the reason Jet had brought the rat packs along. She stared at the tube of synth paste in her hand, and then said in a distant tone, "This is a relic, you know." Sunny raised an eyebrow. "How so?" Jet sighed and put the tube down. "Synth paste can't be produced in the dream realm. So, the next generation, or perhaps the one after that, will never be able to taste it. They won't even know what it is." She smiled faintly. "In fact, synth paste is already starting to disappear. Production has fallen almost by 20%, not only because the infrastructure of the waking world is swiftly deteriorating, but also because there is less demand. It was mostly distributed among people in the outskirts, after all, and you have seen how the outskirts look now. Most settlers in the second wave were from there, and with the agriculture in the dream realm taking off, they have better things to eat now." Sunny let out a heavy sigh. "You are killing me today. Was that your intention?" The sorry state of the terrace district had already been a blow. Learning that synth paste, a staple of life that had seemed inalienable, was under threat of becoming a thing of the past made Sunny feel old. It made him feel like time was moving too fast, leaving him behind, and he was not even 30 yet. Gods, meanwhile, were meant to live for thousands of years. What would become of Sunny if he did succeed in conquering the fifth nightmare? What kind of world would be around him in 300 years? And what kind of being would he be? A being who would never taste synth paste again, for one. Jet chuckled. "Killing you, huh?" She found a glass, wiped it with a paper towel, and poured the sterile water into it. "Don't you find it funny? We are the only two awakened from the outskirts who survived long enough to make something of ourselves." And we both did that by dying in the first nightmare. If that is not irony, I don't know what is. Chapter 3012, Free Agent Jet, remained silent for a few moments, then sighed. I know that I already said it, but I am really glad that you are still around, Sonny. Otherwise, I would have been the only one, and that would have been a bit lonely, I think. Sonny smiled. Likewise. I mean, I am also really glad to still be around. Being around is the best. She chuckled. Who knew that a scrawny kid I babysat during his first nightmare would become a sovereign one day? Life truly is full of surprises. Shuts up. Sonny chewed his cracker and reached for the second one, expertly squeezing the last bit of synth paste out of the tube by rolling its end into a tight spiral. You know, I really hoped that you had forgotten the details of that day. But you just had to go and tattle on me to my subordinates. Seated comfortably on the sofa, Jet shrugged. I don't really remember much. You were just one of countless sleepers I watched challenge the nightmare after all. Some of them woke up, some of them didn't. The latter were far more memorable. Plus, I was perpetually overworked, sleep-deprived, and running low on essence back then. But you were from the outskirts, so I do remember a bit. She looked at him curiously. What about you? Do you remember it well? Sonny nodded. Of course. It was pretty unforgettable for me. It is not every day that you conquer the first nightmare after all. Plus, you were the first real awakened I met, and the advice you gave me back then really saved my skin. I don't know if I'd still be alive today if some other government agent had been sent to observe me in my sleep. He did not mention that Jet herself was very memorable as well. Sonny looked at her, suddenly realizing that she looked almost exactly the same as she had back then. Transcendence augmented her cold beauty even further, of course, and her presence was far more powerful. But Jet was always herself. She even wore the same dark blue uniform, complete with black leather boots and silver epaulets. The only difference was that there were 4 stars on her shoulder insignia instead of 3 now. Jet looked down and remained silent for a moment. A government agent? Yeah. With that, she raised a hand and detached the insignia from her sleeve, then dropped it into the glass of water. Sonny watched her do that in confusion. What was that for? Jet did not answer for a bit, then sighed and leaned back on the sofa. She gave him a composed look. I am retiring, Sonny. He froze. Jet smiled faintly. In fact, I already did. I resigned from my post this morning, about an hour before we met. So, I guess I am unemployed now. Since Sonny still couldn't form a reaction, she looked away and grimaced. It feels strange. I spent most of my life as a cog in the government machine, 20 years of service or so, more than I spent as a non-citizen in the outskirts. So, I don't even know who I am without this insignia. Sonny finally regained his ability to speak. You resigned. What? Why? Jet looked down, pushing the glass with the insignia from side to side. She remained silent for a while, then shrugged. It didn't feel the same without the old man, but mostly. She looked at Sonny and smiled. You know why? Her expression slowly turned serious. The 4th nightmare awaits, and nobody knows how long it will last, let alone if I will return from it. So, I've been training people to replace me in the last year, and once they were trained, I figured I might as well quit. Jet remained silent for a moment. It's because I have grown too big for the government. She smiled wistfully. I don't mean that being a government officer is beneath me now. It's just that my influence has become too great. It has become too overpowering, to the point that my name and a government are slowly becoming synonymous. Jet's expression darkened, and she shook her head. And something like that must never happen. The authority of a single individual must never swallow the government, otherwise it would become no different from a great clan. And there's already plenty of those around. A frown slowly appeared on Sonny's face. But can the government even exist without you? Wake of Ruin is gone, and you are leaving. How will it? Jet gave Sonny a humorous glance. I think you have a skewed perception of the government, Sonny. It's because you mostly dealt with its military arm and me, I think. But actually, its administrative arm is both larger and more important. There are a lot of talented people making up the government, and most of them are not even awakened. That is another reason why I can't stay. My presence resoundingly breaks the fragile balance between the awakened and mundane humans serving the government. She sighed again. Well, it's a done deal anyway. I guess I just wanted to send off my career in the company of someone who would understand. Sonny lingered for a long while, then raised his bottle of filtered water. Here's to being unemployed then. Gods know you deserve a long vacation. Jet grinned and raised her empty bottle as well. Taking a sip, Sonny shook his head. It feels weird though. I sort of can't imagine you as a free agent. What are you going to do now? Jet shrugged. From the look of it, we only have a few years left before things really begin to go south. So, there's not much of a window for us to conquer the fourth nightmare. I'll prepare as best I can, and then, well, we'll see. Sonny studied her for a few moments. So, you've decided then? She smiled. There's not much to decide, is there? From the moment we conspired to take down the sovereigns, there was no turning back, not for us, at least. You and Nephis are going to challenge the fifth nightmare, and someone will have to hold down the fort while you are gone. Being a saint is not going to cut it. Sonny nodded with a grim expression. She was right. The world needed more Supremes, and it needed them to rise soon. So, just like Rain had said farewell to her friends in front of a nightmare seed not too long ago, unable to join or help them, he was going to say farewell to his friends soon, too. Tama and her cohort had returned alive, but there was no telling if Jet and those who were to challenge the fourth nightmare with her would. A nightmare was a nightmare, after all. Anything could happen in its terrifying depths. Noticing his troubled expression, Jet smiled. Oh, by the way, when Sonny looked at her with a silent question in his eyes, she cleared her throat. I am not only unemployed now, you know. My apartment was a government residence, so I guess I am homeless now, too. She looked around. What a coincidence. A nice, friendly junior of mine has just become a homeowner. Wow, congratulations. Sonny's expression slowly changed. Wait, this touching gesture of yours, gifting my home back to me, you didn't arrange all that just to have somewhere to crash, did you? Jet looked at him and blinked innocently. What was that? You think I should crash here for a bit? Oh no, I couldn't. I wouldn't want to impose. Thanks for offering, though, really. The corner of Sonny's eye twitched. I didn't offer anything. Jet grinned. Didn't you tell me to make myself at home? Well, since you insist, I guess I can stay a few days. Sonny stared at her with wide eyes. Unbelievable. How come every time he got himself a home, someone immediately invited themselves to live with him? Not that he could live in the waking world, now that he was a Supreme. So, she is going to live in my home, while I can't? One day, robin lizards followed me a 7-month walk. That was simply a whole new level of audacity. Jet was from the outskirts, indeed. Sonny gritted his teeth, then let out a heavy sigh. Okay, fine. That was not exactly what I meant by making yourself at home, but I guess I can make an exception. And just like that, a new memory was created on Remembrance Day. Chapter 3013. Show must go on. Leaving Jet to enjoy her unemployment in peace, Sonny dove into the shadows and emerged in a different part of NQSC. The strain of remaining in the waking world was growing more and more difficult to endure, but Sonny had not reached his limit yet. He still had a bit of time, and it just so happened that there was another person he had to meet. Everyone was on a holiday, but Sonny had quite a few items on his agenda instead. It was for a good reason, as well. Most of the people he knew had been impossibly busy for the entire year following the Dreamspawn's defeat, so today was a rare occasion when they could meet and spend some quality time together. The streets around Sonny were uncharacteristically crowded, even accounting for Remembrance Day. There were hundreds of people around him, all heading in the same direction with excited expressions. The mood was celebratory, and he could feel a palpable sense of anticipation permeating the air. Sonny looked around, then headed toward an unassuming alley. As he was passing it, a loud whisper suddenly resounded from behind an artificial tree, calling him over.
Sonny, over here.
Sonny approached the source of the voice and saw a tall man wearing a black face mask and a cap, his eyes hidden behind luxurious sunglasses. Needless to say, he looked quite suspicious. The man pulled his mask down for a second, smiled, and then pulled it back. "It's me, Kai." Sonny stared at him with a dubious expression for a few seconds. "Yeah, genius, I know. I sensed your shadow from 100 kilometers away." Kai seemed to smile behind his mask. "Why, thank you. It's good to see you, Sonny." The two of them were not exactly separated by distance, considering that one of Sonny's incarnations resided in Ravenheart. But they rarely had a chance to spend time together as friends, as opposed to the Lord of Shadows and the Steward of the West. Today was one such occasion, though, so Kai put his hand on Sonny's shoulder. "Thank you for coming with me today." "I really appreciate it." He paused. "But Sonny," Kai hesitated for a few seconds, and then said in a tentative tone, "Can I ask you something? It has been gnawing on me for an entire year, ever since I remembered who you are." Sonny raised an eyebrow. "What?" Kai studied him for a while. Eventually he asked, "Your clothes. You create them by manifesting shadows, right? Which means that you can make them look however you wish. And yet, you just create the same outfit every day, day after day, over and over again? I just can't fathom why anyone would—" Sonny let out a heavy sigh and suppressed the desire to toss Kai to the shadow realm. He looked down, then glared at his friend. "What's wrong with my clothes?" Kai blinked a couple of times. No, nothing. Consistency is a virtue, too." "It's just, you know what? Never mind." Sonny frowned. "Nephis likes my clothes just fine, okay?" Kai smiled. "That's great, then." He did not sound very sincere, but Sonny decided to ignore it. "Anyway, about Nephis, not a word about what we are about to do, understand?" "She must never, ever find out what the two of us did without her." Kai seemed confused. But why? Sonny sighed and turned his head, looking at an enormous banner adoring the facade of a prestigious concert hall in front of them. On it, several words were drawn in a bold font. The banner read, "Gale, the last show on Earth." The reason why Sonny had traveled to this part of NQSC was the solo concert of Gale, the second half of Nightingale, Kai's former band. Having built a successful solo career in the wake of Nightingale disbanding, Dale was giving his last concert on Earth today. That was not because Earth was going to explode tomorrow, but simply because he was moving to the dream realm. In fact, numerous artists and creative professionals were. It was not only people who were leaving Earth, culture was leaving it too. The waking world was still more populous and far better developed, but it was an old and dying world, a world frozen in its ways. The dream realm, meanwhile, was young and full of both endless potential and fatal risk. It was a frontier in more senses than one, populated by people who had no choice but to be active and energetic. The harsh exuberance of a new civilization being built under dire pressure was just what aspiring creatives craved. The real kicker seemed to be so connected with backseats and Swedes and shatters and loads and cloud streams. Paul was all more seasonable and silent. Mystic and woods, man, smart, bells and wit and robes. So, culture was slowly emigrating to the dream realm. Most of it was still created on Earth, but everything new and exciting seemed to be happening across the realm boundary. In any case, Kai's former partner in crime was leaving the waking world for the dream realm, and today's concert was most likely the last show he would ever play on Earth, a bittersweet farewell to the cradle of humanity. Kai wanted to attend, but did not want to come alone. So, he somehow convinced Sunny to accompany him, despite the actual risk to Sunny's life that ensued. Sunny grimaced. "Are you kidding me? If Nethys learns that I snuck out to go to a Gale concert without her, I'm a dead man. I mean, a deeder man. In any case, she must not find out." Kai gave him an apologetic look. "Oh, I see. Why didn't you invite her too, though?" Sunny looked at him with a startled expression. "Hello? Because she's addressing all of humanity today? She wouldn't have been able to come, and knowing what she's missing would have only made things worse." Kai hesitated for a few seconds, then smiled. "Well, I am still glad that you've come." He glanced at the banner and sighed. "It will be great. We're going to have so much fun. You like experimental post-nightmare pop, right?" Sunny blinked a few times. "A what now?" Kai smiled. "Exactly. Let's go." He headed for the entrance, making sure to hide his face from the crowd. Sunny followed. "No, seriously, what did you mean? Hey, I thought it was going to be music?" "Hey, why aren't you answering?" Chapter 3014. Unseen Scars. Kai managed to lead Sunny to a private booth without being recognized by the fans. Inside, they had both privacy and a decent view of the stage. Since both were supposed to remain incognito, that was a welcome arrangement. Honestly, though, it was mostly for the benefit of the audience seated in the main hall below. Most mundane people would find it difficult to endure Kai's enchanting presence, and considering that most of the people in the audience were die-hard Nightingale fans, his sudden appearance could very well cause widespread devastation. It would be good if the damage were limited to dozens of women fainting in their seats. Sunny did not exclude the possibility of a few of them suffering a heart attack on the spot, though. Not everyone can be like me, building a tolerance to this ridiculous guy. I really am amazing." Sunny glanced at Kai, who had finally removed his sunglasses and mask, and sighed heavily. "Indolence 2, Lifestyle in Desire, Life Conscious, and the New Life Itself. Sun's Camping." Sunny glanced at 2. Both of them were already full, and people were impatiently anticipating the beginning of the show. He understood why they had to hide from the crowd. However, what Sunny did not understand was why Kai had chosen to hide his presence from the star of the show, his former partner, as well. He nodded toward the stage. "Are you sure you don't want to go backstage and say hi? I am sure your buddy will appreciate a bit of support. The fans will be happy to see you two together as well." Kai remained silent for a few moments, then shook his head with a wistful expression. "No, I don't think it's a good idea." He paused for a moment. "If I reveal myself, today will become about me, and Gale really deserves better." Kai looked at Sunny and shrugged. "Plus, I think he's still a bit angry at me for abandoning the band and leaving him behind." "Even if I had my reasons." Sunny chuckled awkwardly. "Really? I see." He was sure that there was no hidden meaning in what Kai had said, and yet it was hard not to see the parallel. Sunny had abandoned the cohort and left Kai behind, too, after all. He remained silent for a short while, then said, "Listen, Kai, I know I already said that I'm sorry about what happened in the nightmare, but, well, I don't know. Everyone has been so nice about it. I would understand if you were angry instead. Kai gave him a confused look. Why would I be angry? Then his expression changed subtly, and he looked away with a somber smile. Sonny, you did what you had to do. I might not understand why, but I am not going to hold it against you. Honestly, all of us, every single awakened, are barely holding it together. Sometimes I look around and wonder why more people don't just snap, but many do. Some just crumble, some do gruesome things before collapsing. So, the fact that you chose to pursue your own goal instead of joining us in a tough battle is not even in the category of things I would be angry about. Kai remained silent for a few moments, then sighed. I still remember the things you told me in Ariel's game, about how you had selfishly abandoned your friends because of greed, and how your selfish greed was your undoing. So, actually, I think it's you who is angry, Sonny. You are angry at yourself, but you should really be kinder to yourself instead. The world is already cruel enough, and it has been especially cruel to you. Sonny stared at Kai in silence, then looked away and cleared his throat. Well, Dan, I wasn't expecting a poignant speech, to be honest.
Just more of our usual tomfoolery. Kai smiled. If it's tomfoolery you want, I can oblige. Sonny waved a hand in the air. No, let's not. I'd love to, but, it's embarrassing to say, but I am short on material. I did do a few crazy things since the last crazy thing we had done together, but I already used up those stories on other people. I don't want to repeat myself. Kai chuckled. Below them, the technicians were performing the last checks, and an excited murmur spread through the crowd. Kai remained silent for a while, then said in a quiet tone, But Sonny, I think about what you said a lot these days, about how you were sorry. But you would also do it all over again. That is how I feel too. Sonny raised an eyebrow, and noticing it, Kai sighed. You and Nephis were already gone by then, but it was me who gave the Dreamspawn the last push he needed to break the longing domain. I spoke his name to save civilians at the Lake of Tears, and as a result, everything came crashing down. So many terrible things happened, Sonny. Kai turned to him and smiled bitterly. But I would do it all over again. I'd choose to save those people all over again. And the fact that saving human lives was the wrong decision. That is what makes me angry, Sonny. He looked away, focusing on the stage. It makes me furious. It makes me want to snap. Sonny remained silent, not knowing what to say. The world moved on from the tragedy caused by the Dreamspawn's plague. But the scars caused by it remained. The weak had suffered tremendously during his short reign, but the strong were not unscathed either. In fact, it was the rare occasion where everyone had been hurt equally, no matter their rank. Kai, Effie, Cassie, Morgan, Seasheen, and her sisters. Even Mordred. All of them were hiding how much what had happened affected them, because that was the only thing they could do, considering what the world demanded from them. Below, a lone figure walked onto the stage and bowed, causing the audience to explode with cheers. The show was about to start. Chapter 3015. Never Quitting Super Cupid. Sonny felt a little wistful, but as Gale, a tall man who exuded a more withdrawn and sophisticated kind of charisma than Kai's warm charm, began to play the piano, he gradually got distracted from his thoughts. He had not known what to expect from the concert, but the actual sound surprised him. It seemed that Gale had matured since his days as a pop idol, both as a performer and as a composer. His last show on Earth was a way of saying farewell to the world that had nurtured him, and to the man he had been here as well. So, it walked a fine line between sweet nostalgia and melancholy, tugging on the audience's heartstrings. It was also emotional and hopeful. Kai listened to the music with rapt attention. He was glancing at the audience from time to time as well. After a while, Sonny asked, "Do you miss it? Singing?" Kai smiled softly. "I still sing, I just don't sing to an audience." He looked at Sonny and added, "Sometimes I fly high into the sky at night and sing to my heart's content. Nobody can hear me, but I don't mind. In fact, I've grown to enjoy it a great deal." Kai looked down into the crowded hall of the venue. Back when I was an idol, I was constantly bombarded by everyone's opinions of me and of what I did. It was as if who I was depended on how people perceived me. So, I could not help but be obsessed with how I was perceived. It felt like there were a million people in my head, all talking over each other, and that left no space for my own voice to be heard. But when I am alone in the sky, with only the moon and the stars to hear me sing, nothing exists except for my own voice. So I'm singing to myself, and in those moments, nobody dictates who I am but me. Kai chuckled. But the past, goodness, I was never in danger, but everything felt so dire. Every performance, every interview, every fan meeting. It was like my life depended on doing well. I really wanted everyone to love me, and they did. But the more I was loved, the lonelier it felt. Because I felt that people loved a carefully crafted image of me, not the real thing. So I always felt like there was an invisible wall between me and everyone else. I always felt alienated. He looked at Sunny and smiled. That was one of the reasons why I liked you so much when we met in the dark city, actually. It was so refreshing to meet someone who had no idea who I was, and did not care to find out either. When you found me in that well, I was just a sleeper named Kai. So I felt less lonely in your company than when I was surrounded by crowds of adoring fans. Sunny stared at him for a while, then looked away in embarrassment. Well, that was a really long answer to a very simple question. No would have sufficed, you know? Kai laughed, then covered his mouth, glanced toward the stage, and answered in a lower voice. I know. Sunny smiled. Thanks for letting me know, though. I always thought that you liked me because you are a little touched in the head. And nice to know that there were other reasons as well. They both fell silent after that, enjoying the music. Gale continued singing his new songs, but he performed a few fan favorites from the Nightingale catalog as well. Sunny's expression turned progressively more dubious. Among the Nightingale chart-shattering hits, there were such gems as My Heart is a Nightmare Gate, Because of You, This Love is an Abomination Ring, Ding Dong Hey, Sleeper Girl, and NQSC. As Sunny sat in horrified silence, the vast crowd of people below sang along to the last one. They knew all the words as well. The crowd sang NQSC, NQSC, never quitting Super Cupid. Aiming for your icy heart, Ooh, oh, never quitting Super Cupid. Loveaholic, loveaholic. He saturates your lovecore freewebnovel.com with love essence. Never quitting Super Cupid. He's coming for you. He's coming for you. Oh yeah, NQSC, NQSC. Sunny threw a furtive glance at Kai and shuddered. Kai was actually moving his lips with the widest smile on his face. Gods! This was what Nephis and everyone else was so crazy about. I think, I need to reevaluate my entire life. Sunny had also considered himself to be a little deranged, but now he was starting to seriously consider if he was actually flawlessly sane. It was the world, and every other human populating it, that was insane. Hey, Kai. Getting his friend's attention, Sunny hesitated for a moment and then asked in a grave tone, Your archery skill, you didn't develop it because of some weird Cupid concept, did you? Please tell me that you didn't. Kai blinked a few times. Of course not. I was a member of the archery club in school. I enjoyed it because training made me feel calm. Sunny let out a relieved sigh. Kai was not done speaking, though. Oh, but I did do a Cupid-themed photo shoot for the release, though. You know, one loincloth, lots of oil. The poster sold out in 3 minutes, actually. The calendar did, too. Sunny groaned and covered his face with a hand. I did not need that information, damn it. Who asked? I didn't. You just went and offered it on your own. What the hell? Who does that? Kai laughed. Sunny, you just don't know how to appreciate music. Sunny gave him an offended stare. I am a musician myself, you know. I am very accomplished at playing the flute. Kai tilted his head a little. Didn't a swarm of abominations rise from the dead to stop you the last time you played the flute, though? Sunny glared at him for a while, then scoffed. Wasn't the last time. And that is an accomplishment, is it not? I said that I was accomplished. I never said that I was good. Chapter 3, 2016. Reason to try. Eventually, the concert was over. Gale received a thunderous applause and left the stage after a deep bow and a heartfelt speech expressing his hope to meet his fans in the dream realm one day. By the time he finished speaking, countless people in the audience were openly sobbing. Kai seemed a little down as well. Sunny hesitated for a few moments, then gestured toward the curtain. I think you should go and congratulate him anyway. The guy is leaving for a whole new world. A deadly world full of inconceivable monsters, no less. Past grudges or not, he'll feel better knowing that he has a friend there. Kai remained silent for a bit, then nodded slowly. Yes, I probably should. But not immediately. There's a whole ceremony to these things, you know. Plenty of famous people in the audience today. So they will all go backstage now. Unless they say at least a couple of words. They will be seen as rude. Then he'll have to thank the crew, the band, and the dancers. Then have a conversation with the managers. I'll go after that. Sonny was reminded that Kai could see through the curtain, and through the walls as well. So, he was probably looking at what Gale was doing right now. He shifted uncomfortably, trying to hide the fact that the oppressive force trying to expel him from the waking world was almost unbearable now. Almost, but not quite. He could still stay for a bit. Sonny leaned back and sighed. I met Jet before coming here. She has resigned from the government, did you know? Kai nodded. Yeah, we talked. Sonny blinked a couple of times. Huh? Why was I the last one to find out? Kai looked at him and smiled. It's just that we are in similar situations, she and I. Sonny frowned slightly. How so? Kai remained silent for a bit, then shrugged. Well, you know, the fourth nightmare awaits. He sighed. Actually, we've been talking about it for a long while.
Yet has been preparing a replacement for the past year, and I didn't really have to. Truth be told, I don't have a lot to do in Ravenheart these days. Why do you think I was able to come here on such a busy day? Sonny scratched the back of his head. I didn't think about it at all, to be honest. I often forget that not everybody has 7 bodies at their disposal. Kai chuckled. That's south. But yes, despite the fact that people still call me the Steward of the West, in truth, my presence there has been redundant for quite a while. Ever since the plague, I think. He shook his head. Seishan has the situation under control. And she is much more embedded in the former Song domain than I am. She has her sisters as well, and they are managing things fine. Kai scratched his nose. And things are awkward between us, sadly. Sonny looked away. He knew what Kai had gone through during the Dreamspawn plague. But actually, Seishan had gone through the same horrid thing as well, and it was difficult to say who had been hurt by the experience more. Being tortured was definitely a terrible experience, but was it worse than having your mind stolen and torturing someone against your will? It was hard to say. The situation was only made worse by the fact that Kai had a messy relationship with the Song sisters, so it was no surprise that things were awkward between them. Sonny remained silent for a few moments, then asked in a neutral tone, "What about Morgan? The two of you were close." Kai shook his head. "Morgan returned to Bastion, so we don't see each other much." Sonny sighed. "So, the fourth nightmare. You have decided then?" Kai nodded. "I hesitated for a long time. But eventually, I made up my mind." Sonny felt both relieved and anxious. He lingered for a short while, then asked, "So, what made you decide?" Kai chuckled. "You." He leaned back and looked at Sonny with a smile. "It was something you said in Ariel's game. But also, I am sorry, Sonny, but I don't think that you have an objective understanding of what the fourth nightmare is, and how abnormal you and Nephis are. That was what helped me decide." Sonny blinked a couple of times, then raised an eyebrow. "What? Why am I abnormal, all of a sudden?" Kai chuckled and shook his head. You You just never stop to consider if things are possible. No, rather, you do not understand that things that are possible for you are not possible for everyone else. You are so powerful that your entire perception of power is skewed, Sunny. One day, a long time ago, you decided to pursue strength, and in your mind, it's just a question of luck and effort, of success or failure. Sunny was confused. Of course it is. What else can it be? Kai smiled. What I am trying to say, Sunny, is that the path of ascension is not a straight road. You succeed and succeed and succeed until you fail and die. That is how you see it, but that is not how it is. For most people, success is simply not an option. Their paths are shorter than yours. Most awakened will never become masters, and most masters will never become saints. And among the saints, almost no one will ever become supreme, not for the lack of effort, but simply because it's not in their nature. He looked into the concert hall, where the audience was slowly flowing toward the exits. You once mentioned that even in ancient times, supremes were exceedingly rare, so much so that the emergence of a new supreme completely changed the hierarchy of all mortal realms. But we, children of the age of the nightmare spell, are spoiled. Our world has already given birth to 8 supremes, and we are preparing to create more. Sunny frowned. I still don't understand what you are getting at, Kai. Kai's smile dimmed a little. I am saying that the pool of people who even have a chance to become supreme is limited, Sunny, and more than that, it is almost exhausted. There's barely a handful of those who are qualified to try left, and there won't be more. If humanity survives long enough to have a new generation, that generation will be weaker than ours, not stronger. So, Kai shrugged. The mere fact that I am one of those who have a chance is reason enough to try. In fact, it's imperative that I try. I wouldn't be able to live with myself, knowing that I wasted my potential despite how scarce potential is. His smile disappeared. Plus, I tasted enough powerlessness in my life, Sunny. I want to be powerful, too. I want to reshape the world according to what I want it to be. I dare to try. He laughed quietly. The world and I, we need to have a conversation. I am going to scold the world for being so heartless, and for that, I need to become someone whom the world will listen to. So, the 4th nightmare. I've decided to abandon objectivity and be abnormal, too. Sunny studied him for a while, then let out a quiet scoff. Buddy, you should have just said that you want to be like me. I mean, who can blame you? I am pretty awesome after all. Even I want to be like me, all 7 of me, no less. Kai closed his eyes for a moment, shook his head, and then rose from his seat. The scariest thing is that I know that you are telling the truth. You always do. So, I think I am going to go see Gale now. Thank you for coming with me, though. Chapter 3017. Stronghold of Humanity. Sunny fled the waking world and escaped the unbearable pressure of its draconian laws. At the same time, a different incarnation of him moved from shadow to shadow, slowly scaling the walls of the castle. There were thousands of excited people crowding its many courtyards, and the sun was high in the sky, illuminating the sprawling vista of Bastion. Bastion had always been the most prominent human settlement in the Dream Realm. It had been the first foothold humanity had established in the frightening world of the Nightmare spell, connecting the isolated citadels located in its heartland, both to each other and to the Storm Sea. And even if the basin of the River of Tears developed swiftly later on, Bastion never lost its exalted status. After Godgrave, It became the seat of Immortal Flame's power as well. But it was only today that Sunny felt that he was looking at the greatest stronghold of humanity, at its beating heart. The ivory tower drifted among the clouds above the Mirror Lake. Some distance away, on the other side of the castle, the Night Garden cast a shadow on its battlements, and somewhere far away, the brilliant Dreamgate cowered above the lively streets. Today was a special day, when the Dreamgate connected Bastion to Ravenheart. People could travel freely between the two great citadels, ostensibly turning them into one colossal city. Mundane people, awakened, echoes, enthralled nightmare creatures, all of them flooded the streets, serving as an unmistakable reminder of how powerful humanity had grown. The four great citadels seemed to have become one, lending their immense weight to that feeling of strength. Looking at it, one could just believe that humanity could really withstand the apocalypse. Ah, damn it! On top of the main keep of the castle, Effie was standing alone on a secluded rampart, her tall figure contoured beautifully against the brilliant sky. When Sunny arrived, she was engaged in a strange ritual. There was a scattering of small white balls on the stones in front of her, and she was holding an odd alloy weapon in her hand, not quite a warhammer, but not quite a mace either. As Sunny emerged from the shadows, she swung the weapon in a graceful arc and sent one of the balls flying into the sky with a thunderclap. The ball glistened like a tiny meteor and disappeared into the distance, never to be seen again. Sunny stared at all that with a confused expression. "Who are you trying to kill? And why are you using such a strange method?" Effie inhaled deeply, then turned to him and smiled. "Hey, Sunny." She used her odd weapon to roll another ball into position and looked into the distance. "I am not trying to kill anyone, just trying to relax. This here is an ancient ceremony from before the dark times, something called golf. I read in the book that people performed it to relax." Sunny raised an eyebrow. "Really? So what's the purpose of this ceremony?" Effie hesitated. "To get the ball into a small hole, I guess. Wait." She opened her mouth, her eyes glinting with mischievous light, but then just sighed. There are hundreds of kilometers between Bastion and the Storm Sea. Effie grinned. "Exactly!" With that, she swung her club again, producing another thunderclap. The ball disappeared behind the horizon. Effie watched it fly away, then shrugged. "Honestly, I sort of get it. I don't think that the goal even matters. It just feels nice to give something a good whack sometimes." "Wait!" She opened her mouth again, but then just shook her head again. "Wanna try?" Well, Sunny considered it for a moment. Could he get the ball into the Storm Sea? Honestly, it was not impossible. He had bombarded the winter beast with heavy javelins from at least 20 kilometers away. As a saint, he wasn't a saint anymore, and the golf balls were way lighter than those javelins had been, so there was no telling how far they would fly. They would undoubtedly fly over Rivergate, though, which meant that he did not run the risk of killing someone by accident. Sure, why not? Sunny took the golf club from Effie, chose a ball, prepared for a few moments, and whacked it with all his titanic strength. The ball disintegrated with a loud boom, and the club exploded into a cloud of metal shrapnel. Effie laughed. "Oh, right, I forgot to say."
The fun part is trying to find the right balance between a forceful whack and I think I'll stop here. Anyway, it's a good exercise for learning how to precisely control your strength. In fact, I stumbled onto this whole thing when coming up with ways to train Dumpling, back when he couldn't control his transcendent strength yet. Sonny stared at Effie somberly for a while, then asked in a dark tone, "What's wrong with you?" Effie blinked a couple of times. "What do you mean?" He shook his head. "That was what? At least 4 flawless openings for a dirty joke, and you just ignored them completely. Where's the real Effie? And what have you done to her?" Effie remained silent for a little while, then looked away. "The real Effie just wants to whack some balls in peace." Sonny smiled. "Sorry for breaking your club, then." She gave him a long look and chuckled. "Are you joking? I did mention that I made this for Little Ling, did I not? I had 400 of them made, and he only destroyed half of them." With that, Effie leaned down and pulled another club from a storage memory. "Now then, let's get the next one into the storm sea for sure." She sent another ball into the sky and sighed in satisfaction, looking at the sprawling city below them. "Hey, Sonny, did you know that Bastion is larger than NQSC now?" Effie leaned on the club. "NQSC has a way larger population, but it is also built vertically. Most buildings have countless floors, both above and below ground. Bastion, however, is mostly horizontal, so it covers much more ground. An immense amount of ground, really." She pointed southward. "And despite our tram system, the bicycles, the eco-rickshaws, and the ferries, traveling from one part of the city to another still takes too much time. Around half of the people living in the south have never been to the northern reaches of Bastion. In fact, they have not even been to every district in the south. And despite the fact that a constant torrent of settlers is leaving Bastion for other Citadel cities, the population is still growing, which brings its own swarm of problems." Effie looked down. "What I'm trying to say is that we are at capacity. We are way past it, actually, and there are still billions of people who need to be settled somewhere in the dream realm. That's pretty bad." Sonny lingered for a short while. "Yeah, I know. Of course I do. But why are you telling me this now?" Effie shrugged. "Just to illustrate why I'm here swinging a club. This is the kind of problem we're facing today." Effie sighed and rolled the next ball into position. "So, challenging the nightmare seems trivial in comparison, doesn't it?" She raised the club, remained motionless for a moment, and then lowered it with a heavy sigh. "It should seem trivial, but it doesn't." Chapter 3, 2018. Oh, children, Sonny studied Effie for a short while. She had long recovered from the harrowing starvation forced upon her by the Dreamspawn, looking as hale and brimming with vitality as ever. Her figure was just as outstanding as it had always been. Her skin was dewy and supple, and her eyes were bright and clear. However, there was a shadow hiding in their depths, one that had not been there before. Sonny hesitated, then manifested a similar kind of club to hers. Walking over to stand over one of the balls, he asked, "Shall we compete to see who can hit a ball further?" Effie gave him a dubious look. "There's no way to see where they fall, though." "How are we going to judge the winner?" Sonny scratched the back of his head. Even the vast reach of his shadow sense was not enough for that purpose. He could potentially send one of his incarnations or shadows to the shores of the storm sea, but that felt like too much hassle. "Whatever. Let's just whack some balls, then." He remembered how Effie had done it and swung the club. This time, it did not shatter. Sadly, the ball still exploded. Sonny sighed. "Damn." Effie laughed and swung hers, then watched her ball streak across the sky with satisfaction. Sonny spoke in a neutral tone. "Everyone seems inclined to talk about the fourth nightmare today. Jet, Kai, now you too." Effie shrugged. "Well, today is Remembrance Day. It has been a year since the end of the plague, and the immediate fires caused by it have been put out. Now, for the first time, we have time to look to the future, instead of focusing on how to deal with the fallout of the past. So it's only natural that everyone is thinking about the nightmare." Sonny lingered a bit. "You seem to be in a bad mood." She shook her head. "Not bad, just there's a lot to consider, I guess." Effie studied the vista of the Bastion. "Do you know that people in Bastion almost never have nightmares? Not in the past year, at least. As a result, we are doing much better than all other cities. Crime is down. Productivity is up. The same goes for most other parameters. That's how important good sleep is, I guess, especially when the entire species is dealing with a recent trauma." She glanced at Sonny and smiled a little. "And it's all because of that horse of yours. Ever since it settled in the real Bastion, things like that keep happening." That's the impact one supreme creature can make. So, how can I not be thinking about the fourth nightmare? Sonny remained silent for a long while, considering his words carefully. In the end, he said, "No one is forcing you to challenge it, Effie. You don't have to do it if you don't want to." She chuckled and looked at him with humorous sparks glistening in her hazel eyes. "Sonny, did you ever want to challenge a nightmare?" He could not help but scoff. "What? Of course not. It was just that the circumstances forced me to. Still forcing me, actually. I would much rather live somewhere comfortably without the need to risk getting killed." Effie sent another ball flying with a loud thunderclap. "There you go, then. The world is ending, Sonny, and I have a lot to lose. So I am quite motivated to grow as powerful as I can and prevent it from falling apart completely. It's deeply ironic, don't you think?" As Sonny shrugged, unsure what to say, Effie sighed. She stared at the scattered balls for a while, then spoke in a quiet tone. "Sonny, you were 7 when your mother died, weren't you?" He was surprised by the question. After looking at her silently for a while, Sonny nodded. "Yes. Why are you asking?" Effie grimaced and rolled another ball closer to herself. "Ling is 7. Actually, he's turning 8 soon. So, that's why. How long are we going to spend in the nightmare? A year, maybe? 2 years? Nobody knows. And while I have no intention of dying, there's a distinct possibility that I will. So I might miss a huge chunk of his childhood. Or even all of it, if worse comes to worst." She swung her club only to see it snap in half. Effie grimaced, tossed the bent handle down, and cursed quietly. Sonny studied her for a few moments, then sighed and looked away. He struck a ball, finally managing to send it flying without destroying either it or the club. The corner of his lip twisted upward in satisfaction. Little Ling and I are completely different. Sonny looked at Effie and smiled. I was all alone, while he is surrounded by a swarm of people who love him and care about him. So there's no comparison at all. Effie exhaled slowly. "I know. Don't misunderstand me, Sonny. I'm not hesitating. In truth, I've already decided to go into the nightmare during our odd adventure in Mirage City. You see, missing a part of his childhood feels terrible. But I have to make sure that he even gets to have a childhood first. Unlike the two of us, who barely got to be children." She looked at the city below and raised a hand, as if trying to hold it in her palm. "There are countless children in Bastion, Sonny. I want to make sure that none of them has to be in a rush to grow up." Effie paused for a moment and then chuckled. "Actually, I am not worried about my dumpling that much. If anything, I worry about his dad more. How is he going to handle a transcendent rascal alone? You'll have to help him a lot while I'm gone, doofus." Sonny smiled. He wondered how far his ball had already reached. "That's Uncle Doofus, thank you very much. How's that guy doing, by the way?" Effie hesitated for a moment. "He doesn't remember what happened, so he's fine. Actually, he's not fine. He saw what state I was in back then, and I think that left a mark on him. So, he's completely focused on achieving natural ascension now. He and Aiko have a competition to see who can become a master first. Crazy times we live in, right? Natural ascension? Who could have thought?" She smiled. "Hey, Sonny, do you remember? Back on the Forgotten Shore, I once told you that the dream realm is a paradise." He nodded. "I do. I mean, how could I have forgotten something so nonsensical?" Effie chuckled, then inhaled deeply. "Now, I don't think that it's a paradise. It's not a paradise yet. Freewebnovel.com. She picked up another club and rolled a ball closer. But I think we can make it into one, if we really try. We will probably fail, but we won't know unless we try, will we?" Sonny opened his mouth to answer, but at that moment the spell suddenly whispered into his ear. It said, "You have slain a fallen monster, an undetectable forest maw." He froze for a moment, then glanced at his club. "Huh?" Noticing his expression, Effie raised an eyebrow. "What?" Sonny remained silent for a moment, then smiled. "Oh, I think I won our competition, that's all." Chapter 3, 2019. Seance, Effie sighed. Damn cheater. As she did, the two of them heard the sound of hurried steps rushing toward the secluded rampart. She winced and kicked one of the balls lightly. "I guess that's my cue. I'm supposed to be at the waterfront in a short while, welcoming the gathered crowd and warming them up before Nephis takes the stage. My subordinates love nothing more than parading me in front of people. Something about making their blood flow faster." She glanced at Sonny and asked, "Did you find me just to chat? Or did you want something?" Sonny shrugged. No real reason. I guess I wanted to know if you were joining me for Cassie's thing. If so, I would have caught a ride in your shadow. Getting there by myself is a hassle, considering how thorough the defensive array is. Effie shook her head. What's the point of my going there? It's not exactly my field of expertise. Sonny grinned. Fast-flowing blood is a bit of a universal advantage, though. He grimaced and then took a step into the shadows. Well, see you later then. Oh, this ceremony. Golf. I liked it. Hit me up if you ever want a rematch. Just a moment before Effie's attendant appeared on the rampart. Sonny dissolved into the shadows. He traveled through their dark embrace and appeared in the grove of ancient trees that rustled quietly in celestial winds. The Ivory Island had been turned into a sorceress fortress in the past year, its components intertwined with a layered defensive array to prevent anyone from entering the Tower of Hope uninvited or leaving it without the permission of its master. So, Sonny could not use Shadow Step freely here anymore. Still, it did not take him long to make it to where he wanted to go. He simply hid in the shadow of a scholar hurrying across the emerald grass and followed him into a spacious chamber inside the ivory tower. There, a group of people was gathered, standing in the shadows along the wall. They were men and women from all walks of life, both mundane and awakened, sorcerers, engineers, linguists. The few remaining spellsmiths of the fallen clan Valor were here, as well as the most prominent spell-tech pioneers. Sonny even noticed a couple of river people, easily recognizable by their garments. You are here? Cassie was standing in the middle of the chamber in front of a complicated runic circle. Bright sunlight poured through the windows and illuminated her breathtaking figure, her hair glistening like liquid gold. Hiding in the shadows in the corners of the chamber, Sonny answered with a thought. I am. He hesitated, then asked in a curious tone. Why are you doing this today, though? Everyone else is taking a break. Ahead of him, Cassie sighed and raised her head. Because getting all these people into one room was far easier today. Sonny gave her a mental nod. That was a good enough reason as far as he was concerned. In the center of the room, Cassie inhaled deeply and then addressed the gathered luminaries. Thank you all for attending. You already know what is about to happen and why, so I won't repeat myself. Be alert. I don't know how long my essence will last, so every moment is precious. After the hum of whispers died down, she turned to the runic circle and placed her hand on the hilt of the quiet dancer. The cold wind blew across the chamber, and by the time it ceased, there was a man standing in the runic circle. Sonny studied him with keen interest. The man was of a modest stature, his posture slightly bent. He wore a strange garment woven out of green fabric, while his wrists and ankles were adorned with golden bracelets. His skin was dark, and his hair was hidden under an embroidered head covering. He was leaning on an iron staff, looking around with intelligent, penetrating eyes. Cassie bowed slightly. Welcome. I am Cassia, Song of the Fallen. The gaze of the man lingered for a moment on the dark corner where Sonny was hiding, then shifted to Cassie. He spoke in a low, curious tone. How peculiar. A beautiful blind goddess is visiting my dream. Or am I visiting her dream? The spell translated his words, but Sonny could tell that he was talking in an odd and unfamiliar dialect. It was difficult to understand, but not impossible. Not that there was a need to. The man turned his head, looking at the blue sky beyond the windows. His eyes narrowed slightly. I'm not dreaming of Micklin, then. Indeed, the man was a native of Godgrave, one of the many memories of whom Cassie had inherited when she received her aspect legacy. Cassie nodded. Nor are you dreaming. I have summoned the memory of you from the depths of time, and once our bargain is over, you will cease to exist, becoming a memory once more. The man chuckled. If that is the case, you have nothing to bargain with. Lady Cassia, Song of the Fallen. After all, if all that awaits me is oblivion, then there is nothing I would want. Cassie slowly shook her head. Not oblivion. Remembrance. She hesitated for a moment, then added, I do not think that a man like you cares about being remembered, though. However, what about curiosity? The man raised an eyebrow. Curiosity? Cassie smiled faintly. If you agree to my demands, I will satiate your curiosity. Inti of Micklin, child of the sun. Thousands of years have passed since the time you were born in the bones of the Sun Killer, after all. Aren't you interested in learning what happened in those years? What sorceries have been created and what feats we of the Flame have performed? He smiled. Sounds enticing indeed. But the bargain depends on what you want from me. What can a humble transcendent offer a mighty supreme? Cassie studied him intently and then said in a quiet tone, You were the sorcerer who created the Asuras. the enchanted suits of armor that the awakened of Mictlan wore to battle beings far more powerful than them. That is what my people require as well. She inhaled deeply. I want you to teach me how to build asuras.
Chapter 3020, Legendary Guests. Cassie's supreme ability was as powerful as it was versatile. It was not, perhaps, as powerful as the ability to make all warriors of humanity many times more difficult to kill, creating a vast quasi-immortal army, or an ability to raise an ever-expanding legion of undying shadows. But it could enhance the power of humanity in other, more subtle ways. It could grant humanity knowledge, and knowledge was the origin of power, after all. Over the past year, Cassie had used her aspect to manifest a number of prominent saints of the ancient past into reality. She was relying on the memories granted to her by her aspect legacy to remember them, so there were plenty of outstanding candidates to choose from. Sadly, her reserves of essence were not endless, so she could not maintain the manifestation for too long. Depending on the being she was manifesting, the summoning could persist from a day to just several hours. After that, she had to spend days slowly recovering her spirit essence. Not all of the individuals she manifested were willing to cooperate either. In fact, most of them were not, at least during the first few summonings. Cassie had an unlimited number of opportunities to try convincing them, though, only constrained by time and resource commitment. Sometimes, she managed to convince the legendary heroes of the past to share their knowledge. Sometimes, they proved to be too stubborn, prompting her to shift her focus to a different memory. There was, of course, a third option. She could simply force her way into their minds and reap all the knowledge she wanted there, leaving devastation in her wake. But Cassie chose not to abandon diplomacy in favor of violence and coercion, not only because of her values, but also because she was wary of eroding her moral boundaries, one act of tyranny at a time. Cassie was afraid to wake up one day and realize that she had become no different from torment. Even more than that, she was afraid of not even being capable of realizing what she had become. That was the curse of those who were demigods. At that level of power, identity ceased to be something one simply possessed and became a fragile resource that had to be meticulously guarded. It was too easy to lose oneself to power, to be corrupted by it, becoming something unrecognizable. So Cassie had to adhere to rules and principles she had formulated for herself, staying within the bounds of what she deemed right. Even then, her efforts had brought a wealth of new knowledge and skills to humanity. Most of the legendary figures she manifested were unwilling to share their secrets, but some were, and what they taught her was invaluable. Humanity had made a leap in its understanding of various mystical disciplines, especially runic sorcery and forging. There was a lot of knowledge that could have helped the human domain augment its civil engineering efforts in the Dream Realm, thus allowing more settlers to arrive across the realm boundary. But mostly, Cassie focused on learning knowledge tied to warfare. After all, humanity was swiftly barreling toward the apocalypse. Soon enough, the waking world was going to be destroyed, and all the citadel cities in the Dream Realm were going to be besieged by endless tides of nightmare creatures. Humanity had to use every opportunity there was to grow as strong as possible, as soon as possible. The secret knowledge Cassie delivered to the brightest minds of humanity, combined with the knowledge the river people shared with them freely, caused a quiet explosion of progress and innovation. Even though not many people realized it yet, there was a true scientific revolution happening behind the curtain, if sorcery and mysticism could be called science, of course. That mystical revolution was simply hidden behind a far more evident and widespread flood of innovation caused by the mass exodus from the waking world. With millions of people working day and night to rebuild civilization in the dire reaches of the Dream Realm. That was why various luminaries, sorcerers, scientists, and engineers had gathered in the Ivory Tower today, and why Inti of Mictlan was standing in the Runic Circle at the moment. As for the Runic Circle itself, its purpose was to protect the audience from the manifested legends of the past. After all, not all of those Cassie summoned responded well to finding themselves in an unfamiliar world, away from everything they knew, and to learning that they were not themselves, but instead a manifested memory of a long-dead person. Luckily, Inti of Mictlan seemed to be different, which was a great boon, since learning how to build the Asuras was an issue of great importance for the human domain. That secret alone could amplify its battle power twofold, or even more, depending on how difficult they were to build. Hearing Cassie's request, he chuckled. "Ah, the Asuras. Why, you are correct in suggesting that I am a very curious man, Dream Goddess. However, you are mistaken if you think that it was I who created the Asuras. I merely perfected them." He shook his head with a wistful sigh. The Asuras were originally created by the Ash nomads, those few who traveled the Sea of Ash, hiding from the White Abyss in its depths. Eventually, all their tribes and clans were wiped out, and the scattered survivors found shelter in Mictlan. My mother was of the Ash, so I inherited some knowledge from her, enough to understand the crude art of building the Asuras at least, and develop an ambition to improve upon their design. Sunny listened to his words with interest, wondering if the Asuras could really be replicated. The ones he had fought were as powerful as great abominations, but that was because they had spent thousands of years being consumed by corruption. The original Asuras could not have been that powerful. Oh no, but even if they allowed Awakened to wield the power of Masters, or allow mundane people to wield the power of Awakened, that alone would be an inconceivable boon, Inti sighed. The original Asuras helped the Ash nomads survive in the Sea of Ash. They were golems that granted them power well beyond what they were supposed to possess. However, golems do not possess a soul, and they cannot wield the will, unlike all living things. So, how could a soulless golem help someone fight against the corrupted? Hidden in the shadows, Sunny nodded mentally. Humans possessed similar technologies as well, the MWPs, the powered suits of armor the military used. However, these war machines lost their effectiveness when facing nightmare creatures above the Awakened rank. Inti shook his head somberly. The Ash nomads solved that problem in a crude, but effective way: human sacrifice. They killed their own people and trapped the sacrificial spirits in the soulless stone. Their design was flawed, since it could not be scaled, not without harming the collective power of Mictlan, at least. So, I endeavored to replace the sacrificial spirit with a living controller. Of course, that created its own problem, since the power of the Asura would only be as great as the will of the pilot, defeating the purpose. Unless... He continued the explanation. Everyone gathered in the chamber listening to it with rapt attention. Sunny listened, as well. Beyond the walls of the ivory tower, the sun was slowly rising above Bastion. And far away, a different sun was rising above the misty waters of the storm sea. Sunny was listening to someone there as well.